The event we have described happened a few days ago in the dim light of the moon. Then the dewdrops sparkled on the field like thousands of diamonds. The heroine of our story stood there at someone's request. The girl had a bad feeling, as if something bad was about to happen to her. The peace of the night was disturbed by the clanking of metal weapons. A hooded silhouette emerged from the darkness. A dark aura emanated from him. His sword glittered, cutting through the night twilight. Two figures in military uniform drew their swords. The infantrymen tried to protect the two women. They whispered to each other about some kavat. The ladies retreated behind the frightened military men closer to the barracks. The number of attackers grew. The hooded horsemen attacked the foot soldiers who were fiercely holding the defense of their camp. Now the clatter of horses' hooves was superimposed on the metallic clanking of weapons. The captain ordered a retreat, but then his chest was treacherously cut by the enemy's sword. The girl in a delicate and airy dress was frightened and trembled all over. She saw how the warriors fought, and timidly asked the nanny what was happening around them. She turned her head to the side at the sound of an approaching horseman. A guy in a cloak rode up to them on a horse with a bloody sword in his hand. Moonlight poured down on him from above. The girl shuddered and involuntarily gasped. She suddenly remembered everything she had heard about him before. His name was Nazar Kavat. Nazar meant blue eyes, and Kavat is a wolf. When the girl met his infamous blue eyes, she immediately realized everything for some reason. The woman called out to Mrs. Rosetta and persistently pulled her hand, trying to take her to safety. But the girl realized that she would never again be able to leave the guy with blue eyes. She thought about running away. The horseman galloped along the path. The girl and her nanny tried to run away from him into the impenetrable thickets of the forest, but the horseman quickly overtook them. Now the girl weighed everything if, after all, maybe that day if she had not listened to someone and had not met that man, that would not have ended up in his captivity. And then everything could have been different. 4 white horses were steadily pulling a white carriage with golden patterns. It was clear that her crew were clearly from the aristocratic elite of society. They drove along a road surrounded by dense green trees. A young lady peeked out from behind the cabin curtain. She was wearing a hat and a dress of a delicate color. She admired the view from the window and called on the woman to join in contemplating the amazing view. Golden hair framed a face with delicate, almost childlike features. Her huge green eyes shone with childish naivety. It was Rosetta Willard Fox. Today was the day of her release. For the first time, the landscapes she saw from the carriage window brought her into complete delight. She finally felt freedom for the first time in her life. And this feeling was simply amazing. At some point, she closed her eyes and, resting her head on her hand, began to enjoy the smell of fresh grass. 4 horses carried away a carriage with a happy girl along the road. She was finally free from everything that was holding her down. Since childhood, she was constantly told the same thing. Her father assured her that his Rosetta didn't have to do anything, that as a princess, she must maintain honor and dignity. He asked his daughter not to worry about anything anymore. After all, he will do everything else himself. The girl convinced that she too wanted to do business like her brother and older sister. But her father replied that when the time comes, there will be a job for her too. But I thought it was too early. The girl grunted in disagreement at his statements and tried to speak out against him. A sacred land that monsters could not approach. The sacred kingdom of the fox, and the man ruling this kingdom was her father. Under the wing of such a father, our heroine grew up without needing anything. The palace, servants, education, luxurious dresses, the love of her parents. She had everything in full. But this was not what the princess truly desired with all her heart. Her older sister, who showed herself early in politics and magic and became the crown princess, and her elder brother, having received the rank of commander of the knightly order at the age of 20 for his success in fencing. And therefore, looking at her elders, our heroine also wanted to achieve something on her own. However, her fate was decided differently. One day, over a cup of tea, the parents told their daughter that they were going to marry her to Mr. Icy. The girl involuntarily shuddered at what she heard. The king, with a smile on his face and sadness in his eyes, told the girl that she was already old enough to get married. And after listening to her father, one thought suddenly came to the princess's head. That if she were like her brother and sister, perhaps she would have another path other than marriage. And now when this journey ends, she will have to get married. The carriage rocked rhythmically, and the girl was a little tired of contemplating the views and lowered her head a little sad. After all, she couldn't do anything, and all they gave her was this trip, so she was going to try as many things as possible so she wouldn't have any regrets. Their carriage jumped on a rock, and the already middle-aged woman who was accompanying the girl hit her. She already suffered from motion sickness during the trip. The girl suggested that the nanny go out to get some fresh air. The woman felt sick and her head was simply pounding. She was already at that age when long trips and walks were harmful and painful. It seemed to her that she was going to die. The princess reproached the nanny for insisting on going with her. She reminded her that she had previously warned her that it would be hard for her. The woman made excuses that this was due to the fact that the place of the processional journey suddenly changed. The girl made excuses that the original path did not pass near the sea, and she so wanted to see him at least once in her life. The woman was wiping away the sweat that appeared on her face with a handkerchief. She said that after all, when traveling to such a place, they should have been careful. The princess was surprised. She argued that the Basque lands had long been annexed to the kingdom, but the nanny continued to sigh and groan heavily. The girl could not understand what was bothering her so much. The accompanying knight of the princess rushed towards the carriage like the wind. The girl greeted Alan. The guy helpfully asked Mrs. Rosetta what her orders and instructions would be. The girl reported that her nanny was worse than they expected, and she asked the knight if he had medicine. He replied that he gave it away before departure. The nanny considered the guy a scoundrel. She told him that she did not feel any better from that remedy. He retorted that he was not a doctor, but a knight of His Majesty. Alan explained to the woman that she accepted him just like that, and he told her not to take it on an empty stomach. The woman was sulking and angry at him. She was surprised that it was all because of this, and she asked what to do now. She shook her fist at him and called him a cunning man. The guy claimed that everything was due to a violation of the instructions for use. The nanny was already starting to have steam coming out of her ears from irritation, that they were starting to teach her about life. And the princess, seeing this, thought it was time to stop it, before the nanny got even more angry. The girl suggested that Alan and the nanny stop the carriage and rest a little in the fresh air, stretch their legs and take a walk. The coachman stopped the carriage near the shore. Okay, knights and servants adjusted the harness on their horses and inspected the carriage. The princess and her nanny approached from the very shore, enjoying the coolness of the water and fresh air. The girl was cheerful. She cheerfully asked the woman if she began to feel at least a little better. The nanny was sitting on the shore. She answered in the affirmative, and she complained that, as she had expected, traveling at her age was already harmful to health. The girl reminded the one who had previously warned about this. She asked if the nanny really went with her because she was afraid of her running away. The woman replied that the girl did not want to get married. The princess assured that although she did not welcome this, she had already agreed on everything with her father and was not going to let him down. That she will get married immediately after her return. Nanny was happy. Her complexion even improved. She said that the girl finally changed her mind and thought that everything was right, that Mr. Isel will love and take care of her all his life. Prince Isel Scallion was the next heir to the Archduchy of Helen. He had a kind character and attractive appearance. The nanny told the princess that if she were in her place, she would immediately marry this guy without hesitation. She believed that a better groom could not be found. The girl did not argue with her because she considered it useless. The woman became sad. She said that since the girl knew this, then was it worth insisting on this useless journey? The princess saw that her nanny understood nothing at all. She asked why she couldn't. She considered it unfair that her brother and sister could do everything, but she was only forbidden to do everything. The woman saw the girl's sadness. She took her hands in hers, and now she understood why her ward was so worried. She replied that for their parents they will always remain children, that the younger ones are always looked after more than the older ones. The girl noticed that the nanny was talking, and I was glad that she felt better. She told her that if the carriage had already been prepared, then they could slowly walk towards it. The water near the shore began to tremble. The princess was the first to notice this. A horsewoman was galloping towards them. It was clear that this man was clearly in a hurry. The princess noticed that they seemed to be galloping in such a hurry towards them. A girl shouted something to them from afar. The nanny asked the lady if she understood what language the rider was speaking. The girl tried to listen. The princess only now saw that the rider was a woman, and I was amazed at how fearlessly she rode on a horse. Her eyes sparkled with delight. She had no idea that women could ride horses so skillfully. The horsewoman shouted, "Run!" Her horse clopped its hooves rhythmically along the road. Hair tied in a ponytail fluttered in the wind. Suddenly her hiss was heard, and soon our company saw a snake-like monster. He was simply huge. 4 eyes burned with red fire, and the scales glistened with mother-of-pearl. An unexpected gust of wind blew the hat off the princess's head. She bent down to pick up her headdress. Knight Alan shouted to the lady to be careful and on the alert, warning her of imminent danger. As soon as Alan heard the rider, he realized what kind of language it was. But he did not understand that he was screaming until he saw the monster. The snake loomed menacingly over the princess and her nanny. Her poisonous teeth were huge and curved like sabers. Our heroine was trembling with fear. Never before in her life had her life been threatened, and she lived in complete carefreeness. The princess realized that she would never return home and said goodbye to her life. The rider caught up with them and reared her horse. A precisely timed blow hit the snake in the head. Blood gushed out of her. The creature made terrible sounds of pain, and the rider was already standing on the shore with her foot, completing her jump from the horse. The girl, having made a huge leap, was already next to the princess and her nanny. She looked over her shoulder. Having disturbed the water, there was a huge monster. The knights only now managed to run to the mistress's aid. They asked her if she was okay. Alan felt the girl, checking if she was safe and asking if she was injured. After all, a tragedy almost happened. She replied that everything was fine with her. But there was something about the rider. The girl sat and felt her leg. It was clear that she had injured herself in some way during that jump. She had a stabbing sensation in her shins, and no matter how she twisted her leg, the pain did not go away. The princess approached her and began to mutter something inaudibly. The princess remembered how the girl rushed. She clearly shouted to them in a different language, and therefore they did not understand her. That's why I asked where it was from. And does he know her language? The girl replied that there are few people here who do not speak Latin. She was surprised at the appearance of the monster, and she was sure that he would not have appeared if they were local residents. She reported that this lake was simply teeming with monsters. That's why all the locals avoid it. Rosetta only now realized that monsters and the truth exist. She clenched her fists in fear and horror. She read that monsters appear and disappear throughout the continent. But this never concerned the sacred lands of the kingdom, and one could see such monsters only in books. The knights approached and introduced themselves. They blamed themselves for not having time, and they expressed words of gratitude to the girl who saved their mistress. She answered them politely and modestly. She assured that she would help anyone. The princess assured her that she was obliged to reward the savior. Noticing that she had injured her leg, she asked how she felt. The girl stood up to her full height on both legs, but limped heavily, unable to overcome the stabbing pain. She assured me that it looked like a dislocation. Knight Alan offered his services as a healer and asked her permission to examine his injured leg. The princess asked to allow the girl to examine her legs. She convinced that Alan was well versed in this. She agreed, provided that it would not be difficult and would not be difficult for the knight. The brown-haired woman was sitting on a round soft chair from the carriage. Alan examined her leg and said it looked like a bone fracture. He assured me that it should heal soon if I don't strain for a while. The woman couldn't believe it. She asked the knight how sure he was of this. He smiled and said that he was completely sure. After all, how could he misdiagnose the one who saved him? The girl was surprised to hear this, but he argued that if anything had happened to the mistress, it would have been the end of them all. Then everyone would get angry, and in all the fields. But Rosetta did not let him finish, covering his mouth with her hand. She said he was great. She offered to get home quickly. She recalled his promise and their agreement before leaving, that while they were traveling, they would keep the fact that she was a princess a secret. She asked Alan to believe her. The ladies were all together in the carriage. The knight rode nearby on horseback. The girl thanked, assuring that she did not have enough words to express herself. The blonde assured that she simply had to take her. After all, it was because of them that she injured her leg, and she simply could not do otherwise. The brown-haired girl noticed that it was already late and cordially offered to stay with her for the night. The princess insisted that they were already in her debt, and she asked whether this would be too arrogant on their part. She assured that they were guests from afar, and this would be quite appropriate. The brown-haired woman warned that it might be a little noisy at night, that if it suits them, then everything is fine. She began to feel sad. The princess asked her what could happen at night. It turned out that the wedding was supposed to take place that evening. The girl claimed that in their tribe they always hold weddings at night. She asked her to forgive her for being late with her greetings. I imagined that her name was Rosie. The brown-haired woman revealed the secret that her father is the leader of the Basque tribe. Rosetta was extremely surprised by this. These places have long become the lands of the Adran, and over time they were divided among several tribes. In the north are the Quat, in the west are the Croix, and in the east are the Basques. The Basque tribe swore absolute loyalty to the kingdom. They were the strongest. Rosetta asked the nanny, didn't they consider the capital to be quite remote from here, and that the road here will be difficult? Rosie confirmed this. She claimed that she entered the field because of today's wedding. It was an old tradition to hold a wedding in a field. The girl assumed that now everyone in the camp was probably panicking and looking for her. After all, she was just going to get some air, and she still hasn't returned yet. In addition, she also seriously injured her leg. The princess understood that because of them the bride had suffered, and I tried to figure out what they should do now. Rosie admitted to her new acquaintances that, to tell the truth, she did not want to get married. That her future husband is 30 years older than her, and so she jumped on her horse and rode away. The girl said that in order to increase the strength of the tribe, an alliance was needed, and marriage was chosen in order to cement the agreement of support. But the Kwa leader soon died, and the decision to marry Rosie was made very quickly. Her opinion, of course, had no significance in resolving this issue. The princess thought that the girls' unwanted marriage made them so similar. She was deep in thought. Rosie apologized to the ladies for talking so much, and she asked the blonde to tell her a little about herself if it wouldn't be difficult for her. The girl introduced herself as Rosetta, that she was going to the sea to help her father's store. The nanny shuddered that her ward called herself by her real name. The brown-haired girl praised her new friend that she was such a good daughter and helped her father. The nanny wiped sweat from her face. I'm glad the girl used a fake identity, as they agreed. Their company heard the sounds of gunshots or explosions in the distance. They stopped, listening and peering into the already descending darkness of the night. A guy jumped out of the tent. He saw Mrs. Rosie first. The girls also rejoiced at her arrival. Alan dismounted, and the ladies got out of the carriage. And now the knight escorted the ladies to a safe place to spend the night. The guy was nervous and told the lady that everyone was looking for her, and they already thought that something bad had happened to her when she did not return home by sunset. But the girl claimed that something did happen. She walked with a strong limp on her right leg and approached her father. The leader was unpleasantly surprised by this event. He began to yell at his daughter for her indiscretion on such an important day for them, and without embarrassment that many people could see them, he hit his daughter in the neck. The princess and her small retinue were horrified by such rude treatment of a young girl by a man, and he continued to shout at the girl. He asked what she was doing that she appeared in this form. Rosie, still after the heavy slap, continued to sit on the ground. She asked to forgive her. The father was furious and did not accept her words of forgiveness. He accused that the scoundrel wanted to destroy their entire tribe with her short-sighted actions. He asked what she was thinking about, that she decided to ruin the marriage union of the tribes just like that. Alan could not stand such attacks on the girl. He asked the man to stop and stop scolding her already. I thought it was cruel that the leader did not even listen to his daughter. Rosetta also joined in, assuring that what happened was her fault. Alan helped Rosie to her feet and supported her to ease the pain of walking. The tribal leader stood surrounded by his people. He narrowed his eyes angrily, and in front of him, full of determination, stood the lonely, fragile figure of the princess. The people of the tribe whispered. The menacing man asked the blonde who she was, and judging by her clothes, I assumed that she was definitely not from the locals. The girl answered that they were travelers from the kingdom of the fox. She explained that his daughter was injured while saving her from a monster from the lake. She sincerely offered her help to him and his tribe. The leader of the tribe was surprised that bandaging them could help in any way. After all, his daughter probably won't be able to ride a horse in this condition. Alan whispered to the lady that it seemed they were still following the old traditions, that a woman is kidnapped and hidden, a rite of abduction. This tradition has already been banned, but it seems they still follow it like in the old days. And after negotiations with the bride's relatives, the groom puts her on a horse and takes her away. And now it was clear what trouble they had caused. The leader and his comrades looked angrily at the uninvited guests. The princess asked if it was possible to somehow persuade the groom's side to make concessions. After all, it was possible to postpone the wedding due to the bride's injury. The man replied that this was impossible, and this definitely won't happen. He asked his daughter Rosie to wait for him in the room. He reminded her that she would also have to explain herself to their tribe. The two-room apartment timidly answered with consent. Rosetta came to the aid of her savior. I asked her how she was feeling. Already in the room, the princess asked if they could cancel the wedding, but Rosie replied that then the groom's side would not count her. After all, they were already in a hurry, and if they ask to reschedule, then suspicions will arise. She reported that the groom's side was the Kruta tribe, and they constantly worry and don't trust. After all, with whom else could they conclude an alliance, except between them and the Kruta tribe? And if at least something disrupts this wedding, then they will definitely refuse and will unite with the Kavat tribe. Rosie was sure that the wolf attacking you was worse than the lion sleeping in the distance. The princess realized that the Kwat tribe was more feared than the kingdom that stood behind it. Everyone knew that these lands had long been under the rule of the most powerful kingdom on the continent. Therefore, the people who lived here, in addition to their native language, also used Latin. But recently, on the opposite side of the kingdom, another developing country has slowly begun to gain strength. And in comparison to the northern Khitan peoples, who were known for their ferocity, they had a more cruel and soulless character. That is why the kingdom persuaded them to guard the borders of the state. This task was more suitable for such ferocious warriors than anyone else. And now the Kwat tribe was gaining strength. They were actively uniting with other tribes, and this began to frighten. Rosie was especially frightened by the army led by the young leader. They defeated even the fierce Khatanas. The name Nazar Kvat was also known to the knight, but Rosie said that everyone calls him Blue-Eyed Wolf. That young man had a cold gaze, and Kvat meant wolf. There was a rumor that his eye color corresponded to his name. Rosie claimed that blue eyes were not uncommon in that tribe. That's why they talk so much about him. The princess was surprised that Alan knew about that leader. He confirmed that this was the case, and I had heard well that he was fiercer than the monster from the lake. That during the war that man was merciless to others. He did not spare his enemies and took no prisoners. And his sword did not know fatigue. The knight heard that people were talking about the cruelty of that leader, as if he had neither blood nor tears. Rosie said she knew all this. Therefore, they decided to unite with the Kwa tribe through marriage. They had thoughts of resisting him, but if the marriage fails, they will be isolated. According to her, many tribes already went over to the side of the Kwat. Rosetta realized that everything here was already too confusing and complicated. She thought about possible ways to fix everything. Suddenly a bright thought struck her. What if you use a double wearing the bride's dress? She hoped it was dark enough now, and under the veil it will be difficult to understand who is behind it. The nanny was surprised at this option. Rosie agreed that this was a perfectly acceptable option. The princess was glad that she managed to find a solution. After all, when the holiday begins, the bride and groom will go to the newlyweds' room. Then it was possible to change the bride. Rosetta only doubted whether there would be problems with her wedding night. After all, the bride had a broken leg. Alan smiled slyly. He believed that the main thing was that the groom did not attack. The knight was sure that if the groom drank at the wedding, then everything was possible. The ladies didn't understand what he was getting at. He explained that if the groom had too much alcohol, he would no longer have time for the bride. The knight's nanny pinched him painfully on the back. The already middle-aged woman reproached the guy that he should not say such things in front of his mistress, and there was a possibility that alcohol would only increase the leader's strength. The only option left was with a double. Rosie nodded in agreement. Alan's eyes were round with surprise and confusion. The princess claimed that they had very little time left. She called for everyone to be called to the girl as soon as possible in order to choose from among them the most successful option for a double. From the tent you could hear out, and the woman left her. It turned out that she did not have the right build and was overweight. The other did not qualify because she was already old. The task turned out to be much more difficult than the girls initially thought. They were unable to find even a slightly more suitable type among the candidates. The blonde encouraged Rosie to find more people, but that was all. After all, she took only her servants into the field with her. Rosetta was confused. After all, they wouldn't have any other options. But they had nowhere to find a slender, long-haired girl. The ladies around were whispering. Rosetta wondered why everyone started looking at her like that. The brown-haired woman began to persuade her, holding her hand. Rosie asked the girl to become her double. The princess's nanny was categorically against such an idea. She expressed her protest with clenched fists. Rosetta was already in her bridal outfit. She told the woman that nothing could be done, that they have already agreed on everything. She believed that nothing bad should have happened to her. The nanny was worried about the girl, that she didn't know how to ride a horse very well and could fall off the horse. But she assured that everything would be fine, and she wouldn't get hurt. After all, everyone here rode horses from an early age. The woman begged Mrs. Rosetta. She begged her not to take part in the main role of bride kidnapping. The girl claimed that this was part of the local culture and tradition. Moreover, this is not a kidnapping at all, but an imitation of it. The woman asked the princess to think about what would happen if they found out about this in the kingdom. The girl was absolutely sure that no one would find out. After all, the nanny won't tell. And Alan, too, as an interested person, should not have told anyone about this. After all, it was because of him that she almost died. Therefore, the girl asked the nanny to keep everything a secret. But the woman continued to object to Mrs. Rosetta. The lame Rosie came in and was amazed. She told the girl that her wedding attire suited her so well. She politely thanked her for the compliment. Rosetta asked the brown-haired woman for her permission, a little late, to wear this dress. The girl assured that of course it was necessary. I guessed that it must be very difficult, and she was grateful to the girl for her help. She hugged the blonde out of excess of feelings. Without unclenching the hug, the leader's daughter once again thanked him for his help. She assured that she would never forget this. Then she gave the girl something. She led her under the open sky from which the full moon was shining. She said that she would need to stand here with a lantern, and she hid nearby so that the groom's side would not notice her. A harnessed horse stood nearby. The lit lantern was in the blonde's hand. Rosie told her that the stars were looking for a bride around the world. Rosetta was pleased with the beauty around her. The woman assured the lady that everything was not as she thought, but the girl claimed that the nanny was simply too worried. The nanny asked in surprise how she could not worry. She asked her to take it with her, grabbed the girl's hand, and put a short woman's dagger into it. She advised her to use it if her life was suddenly in danger. The bride's double checked the dagger, taking it out of its sheath. The girl asked how she could use it. The woman advised to hit with this weapon where it hurts most. The princess looked at the short dagger, turning it in her hands. The girl hid the dagger in the hem of her dress, securing it to the garters. She assured the nanny that this would not happen so that she would have to defend herself. And she asked her where Alan had gone, that he had not been seen for a long time. The woman said that he went to get alcohol for the groom, that he was in a hurry to return at the beginning of the ceremony. The princess was surprised by the knight's participation in the idea, since she expected that he would initially be against it. The princess was going to thank Alan when he returned. The nanny remembered the guy telling her something. That for the first time I saw a girl who so desperately wanted to do something and be useful. But he promised to do whatever she wanted for her during this journey. The woman said that the knight wanted to support the girl's position. And now the princess realized why Alan was always so calm when she insisted on something. The girl bowed her head and lowered her gaze and said that she did not know about it. And she expressed her deep gratitude to the two of them for their help, support, and active participation. Suddenly a shot sounded, and many horses' hooves deafened the surrounding area with their clattering hooves. A guy from the camp with a torch in his right hand asked who was going there. He ordered them to stop. The mounted riders silently drew their swords. The girl turned her head around and asked the nanny what those sounds were. The woman still didn't hear anything because she was old. The princess heard a cry for help in the darkness. The men from the camp crossed swords with the intruders. Peering into the darkness, the ladies saw a fight. It seemed to the nanny that it was from the groom's side. The sounds of battle became more and more distinct. The princess was alarmed by the call for help. Then she heard the call "Quat" from the noise. Both ladies became wary and tensed their whole bodies, realizing that something had not gone according to plan. The campfighters shouted to each other that Kavat was attacking them. The horseman with the shining sword was as fast as the wind. He destroyed everyone in his path. Very soon a retreat was ordered, and the defenders of the camp fled in all directions, leaving Rosetta and the nanny alone. The horsemen caught up with the fleeing people and shot them in the back to death. Blood spattered on their animal skins and clothes. The princess shuddered. A long-haired, blue-eyed young horseman with a bloody sword stopped in front of her. She remembered that Nazar meant blue eyes, and the rider just had narrowed eyes of a deep, clear blue color, and Kavat meant wolf. And now it was clear to the girl that in front of her was the same Nazar Kavat. The nanny pulled her by the hand and assured her that they needed to escape from here as quickly as possible. But the horsemen approached them faster than the ladies had time to make a decision. The nanny hurried the mistress, but she was rooted to the ground from fright. At some point, the girl and her nanny began to run away, picking up the hem of their dresses. But this was not an obstacle for the rider to carry out his plan. One of the guardmen stood up for the fleeing ladies, blocking the horse's path with a drawn sword at the ready. But soon the daredevil was struck down by the horseman with just the lightning-fast movement of his sword. Blood once again sprinkled the rider and his steed. The ladies did not do very well in their running. The horseman was soon overtaking them. His blue eyes sparkled in the darkness. At full gallop, the hooded man reached out and grabbed the girl by the waist. He pulled her towards him. The girl extended her hand to the nanny, asking her for help. But the already middle-aged woman was powerless to help her with anything. She ran after the mistress until she tripped over a stone and fell flat on the ground. The horseman rode away, taking the princess in an unknown direction, and only her wedding veil remained lying on the ground. The rider galloped along the forest road at a full gallop. The girl demanded that he stop now. She insisted that she was not the bride. The man told her to sit quietly and not struggle if she didn't want to fall off the horse, and he hugged her tighter to himself. The girl involuntarily groaned as the vice intensified. She began to tremble, and she asked to be released. I understood that there was no need to anger him even more, but she didn't understand what he told her. The blue-eyed man in the hood turned his head to the girl and was surprised that she did not understand him. Afterwards, he realized that she only understood Latin. The moon illuminated the horse's path. He spoke in a language she could understand, that if she doesn't want to fall and break her neck, she should sit quietly and quietly. The girl became scared. The guy caught up with them. He addressed the horseman Riga. He reported that there was no pursuit of him. It was unexpected. He thought that they would try to return the bride. Blue-Eyed asked how far away the people on the groom's side were. The guy replied that they were coming right behind them. Another horseman was approaching. He told Riga that everything was done as he ordered. A malicious, sly smile was visible from under his hood. He was taking off his hood. He said that their qua idiots, when they hear Riga's name, immediately begin to tremble. The guys laughed contentedly. Blue-Eyed said that his guys were great, ordered everyone to return to their camp. They answered yes exactly, accepting the order of their chief. The animal hooves thundered rhythmically along the road again. The princess now only realized that she had been kidnapped instead of Rosie. She understood that she needed to try to start a conversation. She began to assure him that she was not a bride at all, but just wanted to help her. The assistant riding next to her did not believe her. The girl was surprised that he knew Latin. She insisted that she was only the bride's double, but he didn't believe it, answering that she was lying to them very truthfully and smoothly. The guy with dark eyes couldn't believe that a double could be used at a wedding on which the future of the tribe depended. The princess was even more frightened that no one believed her here. Another asked Riga what to do with the girl now. He offered to pick her up himself. After all, he was not interested in women. Another one rode up on a donkey. He asked if he could go first. I asked Krell why his guys were silent. The other replied that there was no need to rush so much. After all, Riga himself has not yet decided what to do with this girl. A third joined this opinion, and he assumed that their leader might still have mercy on the beauty. The one who was going to take the girl for himself furiously replied that he should not be made fun of. After all, their leader is not the type to drool over a woman, and he advised them to remember what her father had done for their tribe. He recalled the law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The law of the Quat tribe is to return the favor. Others began to whisper and support him. The princess did not understand what they were saying in a language she did not understand. She was shaking. She didn't want to die right here. The blue-eyed leader barked, "That's enough." He told his guys that this girl would become his wife. A hubbub spread through the crowd of warriors. They asked again what he said, and they couldn't believe their ears. One dared to ask Riga if he was completely crazy, reminded him that this was the daughter of the Basque leader. He considered it nonsense and reminded him of past losses. After all, their tribe faced everything because of them. I was surprised at the leader's decision to throw in his lot with this girl. but the flow of his words was interrupted by the tip of a sword aimed at his throat. Blue-Eyed coldly asked Krell who gave him the right to contradict his leader and when. After all, behind the Basques stood the kingdom of Fox, and now they had the opportunity to fight them. And he asked not to put the entire tribe at risk because of his unbridled anger and short-sighted actions. The leader asked, still holding the girl close to his people, which of them had something against him. I asked that greyhound daredevil to take a step forward. Krell chuckled offendedly. He answered that he had not thought and asked to be forgiven for his temper. It was only then that Rosetta realized what they were talking about and asked them to stop. She protested against the wedding, and she did not agree that her fate was being decided here without her consent. Blue-Eyed answered a question with a question. Was that marriage of her choice from which he stole her tonight? The girl shuddered and could not really answer him. That day the guy asked the princess if she wanted to marry him. Isel wanted to have an open conversation with his future bride about making a decision about her marriage. The girl treated the guy well. He was like family to her. But she also had a hard time accepting that he would become her husband. She clenched her fists from suppressed emotions. The guy assured her not to worry, that after the wedding he will not force her to do anything she does not want. He promised that he would wait for her to be ready for a real marriage with him, no matter how long it took. The princess still couldn't do anything, and they galloped until Riga ordered a halt. He was sure that his people were tired and suggested they rest here. The man helped the girl off the horse to the ground. Noticing that she was not going in the direction of the broken tents, he grabbed her hand and asked where she was going. The girl looked at him with pleading eyes and asked if he could let her go. She mumbled that she still couldn't ride a horse and therefore wouldn't be able to run far from them. Riga was surprised by this statement. He said that living mixed with people from the kingdom you could lose your essence. But I couldn't imagine that it was so bad. The wind blew through my hair. Riga said that according to rumors, the daughter of the Basque leader was brown-haired, and the girl had golden hair. The girl looked the man in the eyes and said that he was completely right, and I wanted to explain everything to him. But they were killed. The assistant told Riga that everything was ready. The guy said it was time for them to go. The full moon illuminated the clearing. The girl did not understand where they were going to take her. She began to resist and scream that she did not want to go anywhere. But they pushed her in the back, waving their arms. Rosetta asked the man where they were taking her. He pulled her by the hand. She asked to let her go. The guys around were laughing. They said that they had come across a very lively bride and would have to tinker with her. The girl was trembling. She understood that this was her complete failure. After all, she herself will not be able to escape from them. And she didn't know what to do now. The dagger fell to the floor, clinking gently. The guy blew out the candle. The girl screamed that no one should approach her. The man took off his shirt, exposing his muscular torso. She demanded that the barbarian leave her alone. The man tied his hair into a ponytail with a blue ribbon. The girl screamed at him to get out of here. He answered her that she was very talkative. The princess was trembling all over. She asked not to touch her. She promised to carry out any of his orders. The man took a step towards her and grabbed her hand. She groaned at the rough treatment. She started screaming that she didn't want to. The man pushed the girl onto her back. She asked to be released, calling him a dirty savage. But he asked her to scream even louder so that everyone could hear them. His face was above hers and his black hair fell onto her cheek. The girl did not understand his desire to hear the cry. Then he told her in her ear that he would let her go if she did as he said. She nodded obediently in response. Although later I wasn't sure that they would let her go, and that they wouldn't do anything bad. The man held her by the shoulders, not allowing her to get out of bed. The girl was surprised that this was the same Nazar Kvat, whom they had heard about as a bloodthirsty, ferocious, and merciless monster. She could not judge his cruelty in battle now, but during the war he was merciless towards other tribes, and yesterday they certainly did not suspect such a threat. She was preparing a dagger. The girl told herself that this was her chance, but the man deftly grabbed her hand with the weapon. He was surprised because he could not even think that the bride would prepare such a surprise on her wedding night, and he looked reproachfully into her eyes. Now the girl realized that she had screwed up with his murder, and now it will definitely come to an end. The man examined and praised a small, well-forged dagger. He assured that this would save them from problems. The girl asked him for mercy. Riga claimed that the sharpness of this dagger could now be tested. The girl screamed in fear. Fast and dexterous movement of a trained hand. and drops of blood were already on the floor in the girl's dress, flowing from the wound on the man's hand. She screamed in fright what he was doing, and the blood continued to drip onto her clothes. The man clamped his hand tightly over her mouth. He whispered that she had better be quiet, especially if he doesn't want everyone from outside to come running here. The girl nodded in agreement. She realized that they could be heard outside and that there could be other people nearby. And this performance was to drive out the servants. And still it was not clear what was on his mind. Alan rode to the Basque camp. The seriously wounded and killed lay side by side on the ground. He tried to understand what happened here. After all, they only agreed to stage the kidnapping. The knight accompanying the princess dismounted from his horse. He took out his sword, walked and called Mrs. Rosetta. He prayed that nothing would happen. I looked around. Suddenly a woman's voice called him by name. It was the nanny, and next to her was Rosie. And then he was simply shocked. She asked him reproachfully where he had been for so long. The nanny told Alan with grief in her voice and horror in her eyes that their mistress had been kidnapped. He couldn't believe his ears. He blamed the groom's side for everything that was going on. Rosie insisted it wasn't them. The guy was completely at a loss. The girl said that Rosetta was kidnapped by Nazar Kavat. She assumed that by doing this, he wanted to prevent the union of their tribes. Alan sighed heavily. He thought that it couldn't have been worse than the Kavat tribe. He turned his head sharply towards Rosie. He said that she should help them. He asked to gather all the men who could fight. He was going to catch up with the kidnappers in the tracks of their horses. The leader argued that this was not necessary. The guy turned his head towards the speaker. A heavy-set man stomped towards them. He said it would be even better this way. His daughter didn't understand what he was talking about. He narrowed his eyes. He was sure it was even better that the enemy tribe had captured the fake, and he told his daughter to go get ready. He claimed that he would continue preparing for the wedding. The girl began to contradict him. She accused him, how could he say that? After all, an innocent person suffered. The leader was glad about this, since his daughter was able to avoid that terrible fate. The girl began to scream furiously that it all happened because of him, that he was the first to kidnap a woman from the Kavat tribe. And now they want to take revenge on him for the past. The leader made a jerk and hit the girl in the ear. He said that she didn't know anything to accuse him of anything, that she is still alive only because he is protecting her. The man began to shout that everything was happening only for the sake of their tribe. He assured that he had not done anything bad or dirty, but only because of this the kingdom supports them and stands behind them like a mountain. He accused his daughter of living and not knowing grief, and even daring to accuse him of something. What a girl should think about the times when their tribe will prosper. That marriage is something she must do for the sake of all the people, and he ordered her to go get ready. Rosie contemptuously asked her father to tell him how it all happened, that the truth was that he was greedy. She didn't believe that he kidnapped the woman and killed her husband just for the sake of the future of their tribe. Although all this happened before she was born, the girl knew everything very well. And everyone in the tribe knew where the leader got the scar on his face, that it was put there by the woman who was so violated. The man, in the heat of the moment, was already preparing to raise his hand over the girl to strike, but he was held confidently by another man. It was Alan. He insisted that he was not at all interested in what was going on here, but he understood that the leader was clearly not going to cooperate with him, and he was going to go in search of the girl alone. The guy whistled and his faithful horse was already rushing towards him. Alan was determined to save the princess. The knight's foot stood in the stirrup. He easily saddled the noble horse. I told the nanny not to worry. Alan reminded that he was a knight of his majesty, and he simply had to return the princess at any cost. The leader was surprised to hear princess. He even asked again. And only now I saw the pattern on Knight Alan's sword. After all, these gold patterns were used in only one place, and this was the sacred kingdom of Lisa. This was the place where the descendants of the heavenly Elheim ruled. Holy land under divine protection, which monsters cannot reach. It turned out that these patterns denoted the kingdom of the fox, and in that kingdom there was one prince and two princesses. The leader suggested with horror that this girl could be one of their number. He gasped just from such a guess. This girl could be Rosetta Willard Fox. Alan confirmed this, that she is the princess of a sacred kingdom, and that was another name for his mistress. The man cursed to himself. He clenched his teeth. He asked himself what would happen if the princess got hurt. After all, the barbarians could do anything to the girl. And then the future of his tribe was in jeopardy. The kingdom could have simply burned them down, leaving only a handful of ashes in the wasteland. His man came running and shouted, "Trouble!" It turned out that people from the groom's side were returning to the lands of Kwa. The man did not understand how and why. After all, they had an agreement about the wedding. The guy said that they abandoned the wedding. That the Kavad had a hand in this too. The leader was nervous but could not do anything about this situation. A representative of the Kvat tribe reported that they had stolen the bride, and if the tribe wants her back, they must come to them themselves. The guy was sure that if he continued to insist on the wedding, this could mean the start of a war between the tribes. The leader bared his teeth and said that the Quats had always been beggars. He was shaking with anger. Alan was still sitting in the saddle, watching the unfolding picture from above. He noted aloud that the leader was confused. He turned his head to the knight. The guy believed that it would be better for them to cooperate in saving the princess, and then he will consider everything that the leader has done up to this point to be a mistake. The man, gritting his teeth, replied that he could do nothing but agree. He ordered his men to take their swords and prepare for battle. He ordered to catch this man and not let him leave. Rosie was surprised and asked her father what he was doing. And the guards had already surrounded Alan on horseback, drawing their swords. His stake reared up. The guy asked what the leader was up to. He insisted on the need to find the princess. The leader asked again. He believed that even if the girl was a princess, it would still not make it any easier to find her. The man generally doubted that the girl was still alive. The Kavat tribe were obsessed with revenge. They definitely won't let her go so easily. And all they had to do was destroy all the evidence. Alan told himself that although he was angry now was not the time to react to these words. He believed that he needed to get out of here as quickly as possible and find the princess. His foot was in the stirrup. He shouted at the horse, and the sword in his hand glowed with a bright yellow light. The guy waved it in front of the guards. Alan shouted for them to clear his way if they didn't want to die. The golden light from the sword spread across the clearing. The leader ordered to stop the knight in any way, and whoever retreats will come to the end. The girl shouted, ordering the knight to drop his sword. He looked over his shoulder at her voice. Rosie said that if he didn't drop the weapon, she would kill the nanny. The chief's daughter's sword was at the woman's throat. The nanny screamed at Alan to run away, so that he would not think about her fate but save the princess. But the guy was indecisive. The full moon was shining in the night sky. Thousands of stars shone through the timid clouds. Along the tent stood a row of torches that dimly illuminated the temporary camp of the Kavat tribe. The guy was lying and seemed to be sleeping on a camp cot. The girl asked herself how it came to this, that she just didn't like this boredom. She remembered the man's words that he promised when the time came to return her to her father. There was a cut on his left hand. She thought he was lying. After all, if he was going to return her, then he might not have kidnapped her at all. The guy said that even if she returned, she would no longer be able to get married, because this marriage will already be completely destroyed. The girl did not understand why then he made her his wife. After all, he didn't have to do this. She sat under the wall and looked at the man with round eyes of fear. Nazar said that this is his freedom, whether she believes it or not. And he answered that he would do everything as he said. Rosetta understood nothing of his words or intentions. The man ordered the girl to sit quietly and do nothing for now. The girl shuddered. She asked if they would be here all the time. He argued that it would be quite cool here at night and therefore sleeping here would be difficult and uncomfortable. He got up from the bed, motioning for the girl to lie down next to him. Rosette was worried. She spoke out against sleeping next to him. She expressed an extreme degree of distrust of him as a person and the situation in general. The man insisted that he was not interested in a child like her. The princess did not understand the phrase about the child. Nazar lay down and covered himself with a blanket and fell silent, stopping the conversation that was useless in his opinion. There was silence. Rosetta admitted to herself that she was cold and wanted to sleep, but she absolutely refused to go to bed next to this man. She decided to sit for now, and then try to escape if even the slightest loophole opened for this. For some time, she reassured herself that everything would be fine and she could return. Curled up, the girl fell asleep right on the floor of the temporary tent, right in her wedding dress. Bare feet approached her. The man easily picked up the soundly sleeping girl in his arms and carried her to the bed. She didn't even understand how it happened, but only lay down more comfortably on the already warm sleeping place, placing her hand under her head. Nazar stood over the sleeping girl and watched as she tossed and turned in her sleep. Then he carefully covered her with the blanket. The man sat next to him on the bed and looked at the sleeping girl. He was pleased with himself. In the backyard of the castle, there was a small garden for Rosetta. The girl stood next to a large old tree. Her parents and older brother and sister were very busy today. Therefore, the little princess constantly spent time in the garden. The girl had a bouquet of daisies in her hands. Rosetta was called by name. The woman asked her where she had been. The girl was happy to see her mother. Her eyes sparkled with joy. The woman asked what her daughter was doing here. The girl claimed that she was playing with Masha. The girl's mother was surprised to hear the name Masha again. She sighed sadly, realizing that her daughter had acquired an imaginary friend through lack of attention. Rosetta assured that Masha was very shy. That's why he only plays with her. She also told her mother something about her friend, and the woman listened to her carefully and asked again. The girl held out a yellow feather in her hand. Her mother admired his beauty. The child said that Masha gives this to her mother. She took the pen in her hands and expressed her delight at the beauty. She said it was lovely and asked if this wonderful creature was still nearby. The girl confirmed. She raised her head and pointed at the tree. There sat a bird with golden feathers. This was the girl's friend Masha. The woman trembled, covering her mouth with her hand in surprise. The girl tried to get her mother out of the stopper. She asked what happened to her. The mother grabbed her daughter in her arms. She said that this might be a good thing. The child did not understand what was happening. It was like a dream. And opening my eyes, it disappeared like a mirage. Rosetta rubbed her sleepy eyes, into which there was bright sunlight. She muttered dissatisfiedly, remembering the details of yesterday evening and night. She sharply opened her eyes and sat up with a jerk. She didn't understand why she was in bed. After all, she remembered very well that she fell asleep on the floor that night. And now I didn't know how it all happened then. Suddenly, the tent flap moved aside. The girl decided that the man had returned and began to hide under the covers. Rosetta saw him coming in with his shirt open. Even among aristocrats, there was no such awkwardness over clothing. The man thought it was good that she had already woken up, and he brought her a full plate of soup. He said that she slept like the dead, and it was good that I didn't have to wake her up. The girl was shocked. She didn't believe that she could sleep so soundly that she didn't even understand when they brought her in, and laid her on the bed. She suggested, wringing her hands, that they were here together. Her gaze became glassy. The man reminded her that he was still not interested in children, just as he had been the night before. He sighed heavily. Rosette snapped that she was not a child, that this year is her coming-of-age ceremony. And here he decided to equate her with children. Riga said that he saw in her a child who cowered in the corner and sobbed. She realized that he was awake and saw everything. The man claimed that he did not invent anything, and he offered her something to eat, aging the plate in front of her. The princess was surprised what color this food was. She was completely unaccustomed to this, where there were mouth-watering pieces and sophisticated table settings. She doubted the quality of the food, fearing that after this she might become ill. She said that she was not hungry and would not eat it. The man insisted that he had no intention of insisting. He said that it was his job to propose and she could do as she wanted, eat or starve. The girl moaned. The man turned to leave, and over his shoulder he asked her if she could survive the journey until the evening hungry. He left, leaving her alone. When Riga left the tent, one of his assistants was already hurrying towards him. He said that he brought what the master asked him for, and he held a woman's fluffy dress with his hand. He asked for forgiveness. He said that he found women's clothing in the village that could fit, but I couldn't find anything new. The leader looked at the dress and touched it with his hands, patting it, knocking the dust off it. After some time, he thanked the assistant and called him well done. Riga brought the dress into the tent. He saw an empty plate next to the girl. It seemed that she was even licked with a tongue. He was pleased that she liked it so much. The girl admitted that she just tried it and couldn't stop, and now she was a little ashamed of her incontinence, and the plate sparkled clean. The man was pleased. He deftly threw the dress onto the bed. The girl stared in disbelief and asked what it was. Riga claimed that it was brought to her from a nearby village to change clothes. After all, she can't wear a wedding dress forever. Rosetta began to look at the outfit. I thought he was quite cute. She touched the lacing of the corset at the back with her fingers. It turned out that this barbarian had prepared both the soup and the dress for her. She looked at him suspiciously, and she couldn't understand why he suddenly cared so much about her. The man was leaving. He told her to hurry up because everyone was already waiting. He said that as soon as she changed clothes, they would hit the road again. Our heroine grabbed the dress by the hem. She thought that if they were leaving here, how difficult it would be. She understood that it would be extremely difficult for Alan to catch up with her. Her body began to tremble and tears appeared in her eyes. The girl called the man and asked him to stop. She began to mumble something and touch her hair. She said that she has thick hair and it can get tangled. Riga clarified what she meant by this. The girl replied that if she changed her clothes, her hair might get tangled. The man still didn't understand her. Rosette asked him to help braid her hair. Riga beckoned her with a gesture, calling her to come closer. He told her to turn her back to him. This made the girl angry. She thought they were calling her like a dog. She was offended that her yesterday's role as a hostage bride had now become a trained dog. But she obediently turned around and stood with her back. The princess began to calm herself down, that she is now not in a position to show her restive character. Very soon the man was skillfully braiding his golden hair into a braid. The girl thought that hands holding only a sword would be rough, but unexpectedly everything was done. The man said ready contentedly, showing the girl a braid with a purple ribbon tied at its end. She thought that this ribbon was on his hair yesterday. The man asked her if something was bothering her. She denied it and thanked her for her help. Riga asked her to return the ribbon to him. The girl answered him angrily, clenching her fists, that she would have returned it to him even without a reminder, so that he would not be afraid that she would steal something from him. The man became a little sad. He told the girl that this was his mother's ribbon. She shuddered, and she mumbled something in response in the form of an apology. The man did not listen to her excuses. He turned to the exit and asked her to change clothes so that she would also go out. He pulled back the tent flap and went outside. Soon Rosetta was dressed in a dress with a brown corset. The men greeted her, wishing good morning to Regina. Another urged Regina to get on her horse quickly. The girl asked what Regina was. The guy was carrying folded bed linen. I told Riga that he needed to pick up evidence of the wedding night. Only now Rosetta understood why the man injured himself. This was to deceive the servants. The man jumped on his horse. The girl thought that no one would say a word to him if he punished his enemies, and she didn't understand why he was protecting her so much. Riga extended his hand, inviting the girl to sit with him. He said that they would already be on their way. Their gazes met. Hand touched hand. Rosetta sat in front of the rider. He told her to hold on tight. He assured her that they would go faster than last time. He grabbed the reins and held the passenger at the same time. The leader commanded forward, and the horsemen set off. Dozens of hooves created a deafening stomp. Long, dark corridor. The woman sighed. She blamed herself that all this happened because of her, and she reproached the guy for not listening to her and not running away. She asked Alan for forgiveness that this old man caught him too, but the guy consoled the nanny that she was not to blame for anything, that he himself was careless and was now to blame. The knight said that even if he left her, it would still be difficult for him to find his way without the help of the tribe. Sighing, the nanny repented of her gullibility. She could not think that the girl would act so treacherously towards them. The knight and the nanny sat on the straw of the cell. The woman claimed that the princess helped the girl, and she threatened the life of her nanny. The guy said that he would never forgive this, and he will definitely punish them all. He clenched his teeth from powerlessness to do anything. But then the floorboard in the corridor creaked. Someone was quietly creeping up to them. The prisoners approached the edge of the cell and began to peer through the bars to see who had come to them. Soon Rosie came up to them. The guy was surprised to see her here. He grabbed the bars and furiously began to ask her why she had come here. The girl asked to be quieter. She claimed that her father didn't know she was here. She brought them bread. She offered them something to eat, since they had been here all day. Alan was surprised that she offered them food when they didn't even know what was wrong with the princess. Rosie convinced them that to escape, they needed to eat well before the journey. The guy trembled at this turn. The girl said that if her father found out where the princess was taken, he would take them into the forest and kill them. She said that they are being closely watched now. Therefore, it will be difficult to get them out of here. Alan was surprised. The girl assured that she would pull them out as soon as such a chance appeared, and she asked them for forgiveness for what she did to them, that she just wanted to prevent senseless victims. Rosie insisted that if they were released, their tribe would suffer. The guy asked why she was helping them now. The girl promised to do everything in her power. Alan asked what would change when she let them go. Reminds me that she interfered with saving the princess, and now let them not think that the kingdom will help them. Rosie said that was why she would let them go on one condition. Alan and the nanny opened their mouths in surprise. The girl demanded that they not talk about the kidnapping of the princess. The knight was indignant. He swore in anger. I was surprised that the scoundrel also offered them a deal. He threatened that when she gets out of the cell, she will definitely no longer live in the world for her betrayal and impudence. The guy hit the bars with all his might, but Rosie calmly answered him that she was not at all afraid of dying to save her tribe. The girl reminded that the knight, however, has something to protect. She held a torch in one hand and clenched the other into a fist with determination. She advised the knight to think carefully. After all, while he is angry, time passes, and the princess could have been lost forever. The knight cursed again, gritting his teeth. He understood that the help of a person with a high position in the army was needed, and saving the princess in secret from the kingdom will not be easy. But if such a person is found, then everything will work out. An idea struck him. He remembered the one who cares about Rosetta and who is able to lead the army. It was Duke Isel Scallion. Rosie was surprised at this decision. After all, I wasn't sure that he was capable of leading an army, but the guy was convinced of it. After all, he was engaged to the princess. Isel was the heir to the Duchy of Hazen, and he could be trusted more than anyone. He had been excellent friends with Rosetta since childhood and had tender feelings for her. Alan reasoned that Hazen was closer than Tara, and speaking of Isel, he can get here faster. The girl then agreed to get in touch with the Duke. The knight began to write a message to Isel with a pen on paper asking for help. When he finished, he held out a roll of paper through the bars of the cell. The guy persistently asked Rosie what happened between her tribe and the Kvat tribe. The girl hesitated. He demanded that she not pretend that she did not understand. He assured her that he had heard something. Rosie sighed and said that now there was no point in hiding, and she agreed to tell him everything she knew in detail. She said that these events happened before she was born, 20 years ago. The horseman galloped through the forest. In front of him sat a girl with a golden braid. She suffered from this endless jump out of habit, and her back ached terribly. The girl is tired. Her whole body was shaking from the rhythmic and strong movements of the animal. She thought that the man would not notice if she leaned her back against his torso. Her body shuddered at the touch. The man nevertheless noticed but did not say anything to her. Although he was surprised, he pressed her hand closer to him. And so they drove for some time. In a small clearing, he ordered a halt. Rosetta was sitting on a stone. She felt so much better. The escort guys looked at the girl with anger and hostility. She swallowed nervously as she felt it. She realized that under such surveillance, it would not be easy for her to escape from them. Riga ordered departure. He ordered me to hurry up. The girl regretted that she had so little rest. She was sad and asked herself how much longer she should suffer like this. But when she approached the horse, she was surprised. There was a soft bedding on the saddle. This made her somewhat happy. She tried the material with her hand. Riga asked her what confused her. The girl admitted that it was too high for her to climb into the saddle herself. The man grabbed her in his arms and helped her sit astride. He looked into her eyes and she looked into his eyes. The girl's heart beat quickly. Its rhythm reverberated in all parts of her body. Riga said that now there will be no problems on the road. They broke camp and continued their mad dash through the forest. Rosetta tried to start a conversation with the man. She asked her to forgive her, and she regretted her words. She said that she didn't know it was so important to him, and that this tape belonged to his late mother. Riga said that she shouldn't worry so much, and that he doesn't value this thing as much as the girl thought. Rosetta was embarrassed that his late mother's thing was not important to him. I was surprised how it was possible. She also understood that if he was a leader, it meant he didn't have a father. The girl asked herself how he lives, and there was clearly something he couldn't tell anyone about. She even felt somehow sorry for him.
She stopped herself, asking what she was suddenly so worried about. It was somehow strange to feel sorry for the man who kidnapped her.
She convinced herself that now she needed to think about escape, and the horses carried them forward. In the clearing in the distance, mountains were visible that were not visible behind the trees before. In the evening, when the sun was already setting, a camp was set up. The men made a fire and pulled up tents to sleep. horses grazed peacefully nearby, and our heroine was sitting on the nearest stone not far from the fire. Rosetta was surprised at the speed with which they set up camp. It seemed to her that they did it in a matter of seconds. They spent the whole day riding horses, and now she really wanted to eat. She was surprised that even in such a situation the feeling of hunger visited her, and at some point her stomach began to growl. The guy asked Riga if he would catch a rabbit for Riga. The girl asked in surprise if they could really eat rabbits. The guy assured that she also ate this in the morning. The guy said that he wanted to deal with breakfast himself, but Riga caught a rabbit for her. I asked if it was tasty. Rosetta regretted eating the cute rabbit. The guy hurried to help the girl. I asked her why she suddenly felt bad. Our heroine changed the topic and asked, why did they start calling her Regina, and what did that even mean? He answered her in surprise that this is what they call the leader's wife. Riga matches its name. The girl was perplexed because the man's name was not Riga, and she asked who Nazar Kvat was then. The leader sat by the fire and straightened the coals in it, checking when it would be possible to cook something on them. The fire hissed and wriggled, licking the stones that lined the fire pit. From what one of the leader's close associates told the girl, she understood something, that strangers call him by the name she had previously heard, and everyone in the tribe calls him Riga. The guy started shouting at his leader that this couldn't be done, so that his wife still doesn't even know the groom's name. It was strange. After all, you need to take care of who you marry. He continued to read the older man. That's the same with today's schedule. I thought it must have been hard for the girl to ride a horse all day. She just sighed in confirmation. The guy was sure that she was already tired on her wedding night, and he believed that we needed to take better care of her than before. Rosette's heart was pounding in her ears. She was so ashamed that they were discussing the details of her night, although nothing even happened. Riga saw his wife's embarrassment. He began to attack the guy, taking him firmly by the shoulder. It's clear that he has a lot of time, that he stands here and wags his tongue. The blonde assured that this was not so and asked for forgiveness. The guy said that this is how all other people see it from the outside, that the girl needs care. He reminded that many were unhappy with this marriage, and by showing that he cares about her personally, others will accept her. Riga interrupted his speech. He asked Shiki if he had already brought wood for the fire. After all, it seems he already sent him for this. The guy assured that this is not important now, understanding the meaning of the finger. The man asked what would happen if Regina froze. That guy grabbed an axe and rushed off like a bullet into the forest, shouting, "I'll bring it now." And the leader was glad that he had sent the chatterbox away to get on with his business. Rosetta, watching this picture, giggled quietly into her fist. She thought the guy was quite funny, but the leader himself remained tense. He turned abruptly to engage in fire again in the middle of their camp. The girl expected him to say at least a word to her, and became sad when he simply remained silent. The fire flared up, hissed, warmed, and brightly illuminated the clearing where they set up camp. Riga continued to methodically tend to the fire, and then the man spoke to the girl. He was ready to tell her about his name. After all, she would have to know anyway. He said his name was Rashid. The girl thought it was quite strange and eerily familiar. Rosetta suddenly remembered, and it even made her shudder. She knew the name. Several years ago, there was a small reception at the king's palace. It was attended by people close to the royal family. The evening had just begun. The king raised a toast with a glass of wine, but then a wandering musician originally from the Ardennes appeared in the hall. It was a brunette with yellow eyes, and everyone became curious about who he was called to sing for. One of the kingdom's musicians was sitting at the piano, and there was a chair near the harp. The guests were in anticipation of something new. Some assumed that the guy would sing the wisdom of the first princess. Others say that he will glorify the prince's bravery. But today, the musician announced something different to them. He said that he would sing for Princess Rosetta. The guy closed his eyes and his fingers touched the strings of the instrument. The song was called Rashid's Light. Melodious music flowed. The guests listened with their mouths open. And when the musician finished his opening speech, all eyes were turned to Rosetta for a second. The girl was a little shy to be the center of attention. She herself listened to the music. Every time the musician's fingers touched the strings of the harp, music flowed throughout the hall. And after the melody came poems with a high syllable. Those words sang the nobility of Princess Rosetta, and the angelic song enchanted everyone. Now the youngest princess was the center of attention. She was applauded and showered with heaps of compliments. The king also applauded, but he didn't understand and asked the question why the song was still called Rashid's Light. The musician thanked His Majesty for the question, bowing. He explained that if you translate the name of the main character of this song in the manner of the Ardennes language, you get Rashid. The girl was surprised that the man who kidnapped her had the same name as her own. The man stood up, straightening his back by the fire. He clarified that her name was Rosie, she confirmed, shuddering a little. He promised that his subordinates would no longer behave as they did yesterday. And whoever she had been until then, they had to accept her as the wife of their leader. The girl told herself that she should wake up and not believe the barbarian's words. But she answered that she would be calm now. She asked if she should thank them and introduce herself. The man claimed that the Quat tribe was different from other tribes, that as long as she was his wife, she was safe. But if she ruins everything herself, they can tear her to pieces like a pack of wolves. Our heroine began to be afraid again. She involuntarily gasped and clutched the hem of her dress in fear just imagining such a picture. Rashid asked the girl to stay here for now, and then he promised to return her to the family. Rosetta didn't know whether to believe it or how she should respond. The girl wondered when she would return. Will her life be the same? After all, now she has lost her value as a bride. And if he returns, he will not be able to live in peace. It was easy to speak without understanding everything, even though they took the wrong bride hostage. But she probably didn't need to play this role. She turned to the leader, and she told him to his face that they would all definitely regret what they had done. This is what she promised them. The guy ran from the forest. He was out of breath and lost his axe somewhere. He called Riga. He shouted that trouble was nearby, that there were monsters nearby. The leader narrowed his eyes. He was worried about those who went hunting. In the moonlight, he examined the blade of his sword. The guy said that people are fighting them now, and he ran to call for help. He was still breathing heavily from running quickly through the forest. The man ordered his wife to stay in the camp and not to leave here. He was sure that the monsters would not come close to the fire, and that way she would be safe. Rosette promised, answering okay and nodding. But I thought that this was just her chance, but she doubted whether she could escape. I stood by the fire alone and thought about making a decision. The leader's sword struck the enemy. Blood sprayed from their mortal wounds. The man asked how much was left. They answered him 5. Rashid ordered to drive the reptiles in one direction. His hand with the sword lived its own special life, delivering sure blows to the target. He ordered 3 assistants to go around on the right, and the rest to attack from behind. And already 3 archers were pulling the bowstring with arrows. The bastards roared with anger. The leader commanded fire, and the arrows flew like lightning towards their targets. Soon the bastards looked like a pillow of pins, so many arrows stuck in their bodies. The guy rejoiced at their luck, but a new monster was approaching from behind. The leader called Nelia, and his sword was already flying straight to the target, hitting the monster and saving the careless boy. The blonde shouted, warning Riga that there was danger behind him. The toothy bastard aimed at the leader's neck. The guy shouted, "Catch!" and threw his sword to him. The man immediately caught and struck another monster to death. The subordinate reported to Riga that several monsters had escaped. The man frowned with displeasure. 3 monsters ran away into the darkness, growling. The guys asked the leader if it was worth catching up with them. He did not give such an order, but suggested counting those who were lying in the clearing. His sword was covered in blood. The blonde noticed out loud that the creatures had become stronger than before. Riga agreed and added that he had never been attacked from behind. The man agreed with Shiki's words. It turned out they could not predict the actions of the monsters. He thought about the girl left in the camp, and now he was afraid for her. After all, it was unknown whether these creatures were afraid of fire. The leader's sword dripped onto the ground with the still fresh blood of the last monster he had slain. The man commanded the return to camp. The girl ran through the impenetrable forest. Raising the hem of her dress, she escaped from the camp lit by fires in a direction unknown to her, looking around cautiously. She was already out of breath from running so fast. Mentally asked to save her. At that moment, she remembered how she ran around the palace as a little girl. She quietly bypassed the guards and ran away. The princess made a lot of efforts to open that creaky door, and she looked around to see if anyone could see her. And having opened the huge door, she wondered whether anyone would be able to find her here if she hid here well. And how fun it will be when the nannies are looking for her everywhere. Her small feet walked down the stairs. She remembered that she had been strictly ordered never to enter this room, but she thought that nothing terrible would happen if she hid here and then came out. But then the girl heard a rustling sound. She covered her head with her hands in fear. Then after waiting, she asked who was there. One of the leader's close people came out from behind a tree. He was surprised why Mistress Regina was wandering around here by herself. He covered his mouth with his hand in horror, and he assumed that she was trying to escape. His eyes sparkled with an evil light. The girl herself began to attack him. She was suspicious of what he was doing here while everyone else was fighting monsters. The guy assured that he didn't have to go there at all. The girl thought that there was finally something uninteresting, but the guy continued to interrogate her whether she tried to escape. She claimed that their camp was attacked by monsters, and while she was running away from them, she got lost in a forest unfamiliar to her. And I thought to myself that I needed to stall for time, in the hope that she would have a chance. The guy approached the girl. He laughed at her. He said that her primitive brain could only think of such a thing to blurt out to him. He doubted that the leader's wife was lost. After all, the camp was in the opposite direction. He continued to advance on the girl. She shuddered with fear. But then Regina pulled herself together. She grabbed the hem of her dress. She said that he seemed to have forgotten that she was the wife of his leader. She threatened that he had better not touch her on purpose. She shook her fist at him with the most determined look. The guy was surprised at the girl's courage, how she had just suddenly remembered her high status in their tribe. He mocked her. After all, it was obvious that while everyone was fighting monsters, she was seizing the right moment to sneak out of the camp unnoticed. The girl just glanced around. She realized that she had nowhere to wait for help, and so she went on the offensive herself. She said that he still had no right to deal with her, and only Riga himself can decide its fate. The guy asserted, gritting his teeth, that he never recognized Rashid as his leader. After all, he had no right to be one from the very beginning. And now he also took the daughter of the Basque commander as his wife instead of revenge. He said not to be made fun of, that he didn't care about her, and even if she dies in front of them, he won't care. Our heroine was trembling all over. She felt fierce hatred. She asked the guy what happened that he was so cruel to her. He replied that everyone, including her, saw the color of Rashid's eyes, and he asked her if she knew the meaning of this. He suggested that he tell her everything briefly. From his words, this was proof of his illegitimacy. He held the girl by the shoulder. She screamed for him to leave and broke away from him, but he grabbed her tighter now by the forearm. He told her to listen to him carefully, that her father kidnapped Regina in the past, after which this woman returned alone and she gave birth to a child with blue eyes. The girl was surprised that the Basque leader could be Rashid's father, but the guy wasn't sure about it. After all, no matter how crazy Rashid was, he would not have married his own sister. He said that in the past the leader was disgraced when he tried to take possession of a woman. She cut his face with a dagger, leaving deep scars as a souvenir. But he was never able to recover from this shame. Therefore he threw this woman to the slaves. It turned out that the father was one of those slaves. The then Riga, being a leader, threw everything he had and rushed there alone. He freed Regina, but he himself died there like a stray dog. The woman was sad, but there was so much gossip and bad looks around her. And in the morning, the tribe, which had lost its leader, was mercilessly defeated by the Basques. And after that, they were on the verge of extinction for a long time. Rashid was someone who should not have been born into this world, but soon it became their Riga. He became their leader, protection, and master. His unscrupulous mother died, calling him Rashid in order to make him Riga. And now this illegitimate son of a slave bore this name, the name of the only son and descendant of Arki, the god of light. This was what kept everyone silent. That's why everyone is forced to recognize this fake. And the guy doubted whether this man could truly take revenge for their tribe. The envious man held the girl by the hair. He said that Rashid is no different from his father. He was such a weakling. And if she wanted to blame anyone, it was only her father for doing this. The guy assured her that everything that was happening to her now was how the sins of her father were being returned to her. He believed that if the girl had sat quietly, Riga would have protected her to the very end. He brought her golden hair to his face with his hand and smelled it. The girl asked to stop, but the guy insisted that she should accept the inevitable. His face was very close to hers. He assured that she might even like it. Without even hoping that someone could hear her, she began to call for help, And then the guy flew away from her and held his head with a groan. Riga asked the brat what he was doing. His gaze was cold and his fists were clenched. The guy looked at the girl with anger, and she understood that she was already safe under the protection of her husband. The guy asked why they were in such a hurry to get to the camp. He assumed that his master was worried about Regina. Sika was glad that the leader cared so much about his wife. After all, he knew from the beginning that this would happen. The man stroked the guy's head. He recalled that before that he wanted to scold him. The guy said that Regina is safe because she has at least one person on her side. Sika kept pace with Rashid. He said that it was not easy for him either when he first came to the Kvat tribe. And then, if not for Riga, he definitely would not have survived. There was a big battle between the Khatan tribe and the Kwat tribe. The man led the only survivor of the Khatan tribe to Riga by the hand. That man assured that he was one of the leader's blood relatives. And I thought it was worth dealing with him too. That kid lost everything at such a young age. But Riga liked the sparkle in his eyes in which his fighting spirit was visible. Riga said that he would take the guy for a while. And from that day on, Sika became part of the Kwat tribe. He tried his best. He took it upon himself to help the woman wash her clothes. At first, of course, he tried to gain everyone's trust, and he showed remarkable abilities in military affairs. After that massacre with the Khatan tribe, the guy swore allegiance to Riga. He assured that they said the same thing to him, and they looked similar. Therefore, the Kvat tribe will not doubt him. And Sika gave the light. However, before he received universal recognition, he had suffered enough. The man spoke to his ward. That Regina looks like a doll made of sugar and gold to him. He admitted that it was the first time he had seen such a beautiful girl. She was like a princess. She didn't ride a horse, she had a poor appetite, and she constantly whined that she wanted to go home. It seemed to the man that the girl was only playing the role of the leader's daughter. Sika was surprised by this statement. The guy said that everything was clear, that Riga simply fell in love with the girl at first sight. He understood that there was something that made him take her as his wife. But the leader ignored these words. Sika was grateful that Riga saved him then, and he assured him that now he lives only thanks to him. Therefore, he believed that he had the right to participate in his life. The man insisted that he had never heard much nonsense in his life. Sika asked him not to be like that. I was surprised that he had never been in awe of the girl. And because the man remained silent, he considered himself right. Then suddenly Riga remembered how he stroked the girl on the shoulder, how he picked her up when she was sleeping and carried her to the bed, that he was afraid of accidentally waking her up. He looked at her as she slept peacefully and soundly, and the girl in her sleep held onto his neck. He thought it strange that she kept vigils at night, or that she slept so soundly as if she were murdered.
When the man touched the girl's hand, he was surprised at the softness of her skin. He then carefully covered her with a blanket, and for a long time he admired her sleeping.
Sika said that the gentleman is just at that age when people fall in love the first time. But many might think that Riga is already a grandfather. Rashid asked where Krell was. I was surprised that he had not been seen for a long time. The guy noticed that he always disappears somewhere in such matters. Sika seemed to be saying to himself that this bastard, when Riga did not give him Regina, is probably now idle somewhere. The man pulled the guy back, and he said that he understood everything, and would remain silent like a mute. The guy with a serious face insisted that he really didn't like Krell, that he constantly complains about the leader all the time, as if the place of Riga should have belonged to him. Rashid explained that he would have become the leader if he had not existed, and of course he thought that he would continue the family line himself, and yet he doesn't understand something. That, however, monsters were rare in these places, and it was strange because there was a kingdom nearby. A man was running towards them, approaching and shouting something. He was out of breath from running fast and could not immediately say something intelligible. Finally he said, "Gone," and Rashid understood everything. The guy repeated, "Regina is missing," and fell exhausted to the ground. Soon Krell was on his knees before the leader. He asked what he was doing, and Sika rushed to the girl's aid. He asked Regina how she was feeling. The girl could not say anything out of fear. Her face said that she was extremely scared. The guy took her hand. He said that he didn't understand what was wrong with this man. He began to calm her down. He said that everything was fine and that they were nearby so that she wouldn't worry. It was strange for the girl that her situation had not changed, and now that she felt safe, he could give free rein to his tears. She whimpered and tears rolled out of her eyes. Seika saw that Riga himself would deal with the scoundrel. He asked the guy what he was doing here. In response, he only clenched his teeth and grinned. Then turning his head, he saw that the girl was sitting on the ground, trembling. Krell claimed that he discovered that the girl was trying to escape, and he only tried to stop her from doing it. Rashid asked his wife if she tried to escape. The guy grinned contentedly, assenting to the leader. But the leader questioned his words. Krell assured that he saw the girl moving further and further from the camp, and he assured that it was not an escape from monsters, but from a monster husband. Rashid said that he still doesn't understand what his man was doing here instead of fighting on an equal basis with them. The guy cursed to himself. After all, he had no arguments and could have been torn to pieces. But he didn't show it. He asked if Riga thought that he was doing something dubious here with his wife. He was clearly going to provoke Riga's uncontrollable rage on himself, but the man replied that until he finds concrete evidence, he will not doubt it in advance. Krell has already risen from his knees. He asked that if this evidence is not there, then Riga will not doubt his wife. Rashid explained to his subordinate that this meant that he should not have committed the crime, and the guy was surprised that the leader continued to protect the girl. The man said that there was one thing that everyone here saw clearly, that he was going to hurt his wife. The people who had already gathered began to make noise in support of their leader. Krell realized that he had nowhere to wait for support, and everything was not in his favor. He gripped the hilt of his sword, and he asked me to tell him honestly. Was Riga really going to protect this Basque doll, even though she was trying to escape from him? The man ordered to watch your tongue. He reminded him that she was now his wife, their Regina. But the guy said that this was not so and argued further. He stood brazenly looking the leader in the eye, and he said that blood cannot be hidden. He cited eye color as an argument. After all, if blue eyes are not proof, then what could be considered proof? Seika was nervous. He called the guy crazy. Why is he talking such nonsense? And he hit the ground with his fist. Riga said that the guy would have to answer for such words. But Krell was ready for this. He had already deftly pulled out his weapon and assured that, of course, he knew how to answer for his words. Rashid took out his sword, and his opponent was already standing with a drawn long sword that glinted in the light of the stars. Rosetta wondered why men needed swords. The guy explained to her that Krell had just humiliated Riga. Seika argued that if he is not punished now, then Riga will be accused of cowardice and his position in the tribe will be under threat. But he was worried that the wound that the leader had recently received in a battle with monsters could hinder him. The girl suggested stopping this fight. The guy assured her that all this would be pointless. After all, the scoundrel saw the wound and it only provoked him even more. Seika believed that Krell was unsure whether he could defeat Riga if he were fully healthy. Otherwise, he will commit meanness and not even blink an eye. The guy said that the bastard knew that Riga wouldn't run away, and that's why he took advantage of it. Meanwhile, the swords were already ringing. Rashid fought the battle skillfully, and Krell only defended himself, clenching his teeth tightly. Their swords crossed again, making a clanking sound of steel. Rosette gasped in fear with each blow and pressed her hand to her chest, holding back her emotions. The girl remembered how she stood on the balcony, and below there was a battle. The swords clanked as they struck each other. She said that the tournament this time was so fierce. The guy with golden hair was asking Rosette, did she choose which of the knights to give flowers to today? The girl looked confused. In front of her, her brother and Isel were waiting for her decision. Both guys were good in the fight, and now everyone was confident in their superiority. A guy with completely white hair hurried the girl with an answer. But she thought that last time Isel received it, and now it was her brother Armand's turn. The guy was crying and his friend was cheering him up as best he could. He said that they had a draw again. The princess was touched by these two friends and comrades. Isel would never agree. I thought Rosetta liked him better. The girl was already laughing with them. The guys decided to ask her themselves. She even shuddered from such pressure. A woman approached them and took the girl by the shoulder. I asked what they were up to here. She insisted that there was nothing fun in mocking her sister. But the guy said that they just expressed their feelings. The eldest princess reminded the teenagers that there would be an official reception today, so she hurried them. The guys admitted that they had completely forgotten, but Isel still wanted to talk privately with Rosetta. The sister took her brother and said that they would go, and she asked them not to be late. The guy promised the princess that they too would be ready soon. Rosetta asked what the guy wanted to talk about. He asked her, bowing, that when she grew up, would she give flowers to other men at the tournament. The girl was surprised that this could be so important to Ezel. He insisted that he would not want her to support anyone else, not even her brother Armand. The guy smiled and assured the princess that he would like her to support only him. Sika shouted, "Riga!" The girl came out of her reverie and perked up. The guy said that Rashid's movements had changed. He assumed it was the effect of the monster's venom. The guy said that her husband was injured while fighting with the reptiles, and it looks like the poison could have gotten into the wound. The girl was afraid that he could die from poison, but Sika assured that people don't die from this. It will be easier later. In the meantime, Krell will play for time. And the guy wasn't sure that he could hold out for so long. It was clear that Riga went from offensive to defensive. He already gave his all in the battle with monsters, and the wound was making itself felt. And the traitor took advantage of the opportunity. He deftly made a deceptive lunge and wounded his opponent's side. A new streak of blood appeared on Riga's shirt. Rosetta was horrified by what she saw. She asked the guy how long the men would fight. He replied that the winner of the fight decides this. And he also passes judgment on the loser. The girl realized that they would fight to the death. Sika confirmed her guess, but he said that they shouldn't worry and smiled. After all, Riga had much more combat experience. The girl assured that she was not worried at all, but simply did not want Krell to become a leader. She folded her hands in prayer and whispered something under her breath. Rosetta understood that if Krell became Riga, then she would definitely not be able to return home, and maybe even worse, she would be tortured to death here. Sika saw that Riga's arm was already paralyzed, and he could hardly hold the sword. And Krell, taking advantage of the moment, already put the tip of his sword to the enemy's throat. The guy narrowed his eyes and was already rejoicing in victory. He assured Rashid that he would not torture him for long. That victory is a treacherous thing, and she's not on his side today. He said that this was his destiny from the very beginning, and he came closer to the defeated enemy as it seemed to him. Rosetta turned away so as not to see the bloody scene of the cynical massacre. She prepared herself for the worst. But while Krell was running, he twisted his ankle. Now he was lying on the ground and holding his injured limb with his hand. He said it was vile, but Rashid stood with a sword over the attorney. He said that it was not for him to talk about meanness. After all, it was clear that he was under the influence of the monster's poison, even before their fight began. And that's why he deliberately started a duel. The tip of the sword made a small cut on the traitor's throat. He said that he was asking to be spared the first time. The princess sat at the tea table and sedately sipped her tea. The man who was sitting opposite her explained, "That custom is the order followed by members of a particular society. Therefore, it is more difficult for those who were born and raised in this society to understand it. And even if this is a bad custom, those accustomed to such a custom could consider it correct. After all, when people follow a custom, you cannot call them bad, because they do not think that they are doing anything bad and reprehensible. And this was not because those people did not have the shame inherent in all people, but because they were taught this way from childhood. But they can definitely feel shame." The man raised his finger up. He was convinced that there could simply be a different level than theirs, and he considered custom worse than the system. The moon illuminated the scene. Krell asked Riga to be spared at least once. He said that he would give him a chance. But the mistake had to be admitted in order for his life to be spared. He said that he would be punished for his wrongdoing. The leader promised that the tribe would help heal his wounds. However, he had better not hope that he will be able to walk normally again. Krell, kneeling, bowed to the master. He promised that he would not oppose him anymore, but Riga replied that he should not swear allegiance to him. A female figure moved from behind the leader. The guy began to tremble with suppressed rage. He crawled across the grass to her. He said that he regretted the wrong action towards Regina. The words asking for forgiveness surprised the girl. There were tears in her eyes, and the guy collapsed at her feet, exhausted. There was a bloody trail on the ground where he crawled. Rashid ordered his men to pick up and treat the guy. Sika told the leader that he was absolutely confident of his victory. The man stood staggering from exhaustion and fatigue. The guy got worried. He asked if the gentleman was okay. He understood that the effect of the monster's poison in the wound could greatly harm his health. He said it wouldn't work that way, and he suggested that they quickly return to their camp and start treating his wounds. Rashid agreed and sheathed his sword. He looked back at his wife. She stood alone, scared and completely confused. The man ordered everyone to return to camp. In the middle of the camp, there were erected tents. Horses were grazing nearby, resting before the road. The man opened the tent and entered it. He reproached the girl, grabbing her elbow, reminding that he asked her to stay here until his return.
She shuddered with her whole body, raising her eyes full of tears to him. And when she saw the man's raised hand, she closed her eyes.
But Riga took her by the waist. He assured her that she had nothing to fear, that he had no intention of hitting her. Therefore, I asked her not to make such a face. And Rosetta wondered why he hesitated so much. She felt so sad at heart. Tears flowed from her eyes and down her cheeks. Rashid asked why she was crying. The girl replied that it was all because of him, that it's because he kidnapped her. The princess beat her fists on his chest out of anger at him and herself. It didn't cause much harm to the man. He asked her what would happen now. Rashid assured that he would keep his promise and bring her home. But the girl did not believe him. She said that they only met him for the first time yesterday, and she asked with what joy she could trust him. But she continued pounding on his chest. The man got tired of this and grabbed her by the wrist, holding her back from active actions. He said that he understood everything and asked her to stop. The tent flap opened to stick, and he flew into it with a tray for bandaging wounds. He reported as he went that he had delivered medicines and bandages, but he stopped mid-sentence, interpreting what he saw in his own way. The guy froze with the tray in his hands. He quickly handed over what he had brought with the most ridiculous expression on his face. He said that adults would figure it out themselves. And the girl thought to herself that after Sika ran away, she became even more embarrassed. Only then did Rashid let go of his wife's hand. She was still sobbing and turning away from him, wiping away her tears. The man said that he would try to explain everything to her. After all, the fact that he took her as his wife was in order to prevent the union of her tribe with the Kwa tribe. And when the wedding fell through, he thought he would bring her back. Rosette was still wiping her tears with her fist and whimpering. She said that Riga could simply put pressure on the Basque leader if that was his goal. But the man assured that in this case, people from the kingdom would intervene. The girl clarified that he meant the kingdom of the fox. He answered in the affirmative. He asked if she knew that the kingdom was pushing the Basques to the front line, and he takes advantage of the fact that they themselves remained behind them. The girl just blinked her eyes. There was something she didn't know. And then Rashid told the girl that about 20 years ago, an agreement was concluded in the kingdom of Fox. The Basques already had something similar. And then the Kvat tribe made a request to the kingdom. The diplomat guy came to the king with a petition. He stood on his knees, telling the essence of the matter. But the then reigning king refused to interfere in matters related to marriage. The girl remembered how her mother told her about something similar. And this is what Krell told her. He said that it was a wild custom. And when problems arose, the kingdom laughed that it would respect foreign culture. The princess considered that if this happened about 20 years ago, during this period her grandfather occupied the royal throne. She didn't remember much about him. After all, then we were just a little girl, and all that remained in her memory since then was that he was intimidating and stern. But in reality, it was just an excuse. After all, the kingdom did different things using the Basque tribe. The girl asked what at least the kingdom did then. But Riga replied that it would take a long time to talk about this now, and there was no point, because it has no direct relation to it. He asked me to stop these questions, but she continued to insist. The girl assured that she was in a similar situation. The man tensed, and she realized that if she continued her questions, he might suspect something. Rashid claimed that this was the reason he took her, and he called her his wife to protect her in case she was suddenly taken hostage, so that what happened today doesn't happen. Rashid said that the rule of their tribe is to pay back in kind. He expected that the leader of the Kwa tribe would demand a wedding with another girl in a month, and when that wedding takes place, he will return the girl to her father. Rosetta thought that if she returned to the kingdom in a month, she should live as if nothing had happened. The man took off his shirt. The girl didn't understand what it was for, but then I thought that this applies to her. I asked what he was doing. She asked him to wait and started screaming loudly. She promised to do whatever he said. But when she dared to open her eyes, she saw and realized that her husband was taking off his shirt in order to treat his wounds. The man was sitting on a chair, leaning over. He held a bandage in his hand. He sighed tiredly and noisily. There was a significant wound on his side, received in a duel with Krell. and on the same side of the arm there was a wound from the battle with monsters. Rosetta was surprised that the man was so seriously wounded, but he didn't show it. And now she regretted that she behaved this way with the wounded man, remembering how she pounded his chest with her fists. The man began to bandage his torso, but the girl asked him to wait. The man flinched from her pressure. She said that if the wounds are not properly disinfected, then there may be suppuration. The girl insisted that she would help him. After all, he got hurt because of her, and this was her gratitude for saving her. The man turned away from her. Rosetta asked what she understood. Rashid assured her that he was only dealing with the fact that Krell was trying to humiliate him. The girl said that she understood all this, but she believed that the reason was still in her, and she asked to be allowed to help her. She never thought she'd ever benefit from doctors' checkups as a child, and Brother Alan taught her a little, so she thought that she should have succeeded. The girl suggested starting with processing. She used tweezers to take cotton swabs from the bottle. Rosetta only now noticed how many scars there were on the man's body. She realized that she had not seen it last time because it was night and very dark. The man stood up and the girl fussed around him. She felt a little awkward, and she didn't know what to say in such situations. She asked Rashid what would happen to her now. The man reminded her that he had already explained everything to her earlier, but she wanted to know about something else. After all, now for the public she was a girl who was seduced and abandoned after one day. She started bandaging, and she asked her husband not to move so that the bandage would not slip off. Rashid grabbed his head, and he asked what she was telling him. The girl wondered whether her life would be the same when she returned home. After all, if after her return the whole truth about what happened comes to light, the entire royal family and aristocracy will whisper behind her back. Rashid said that when she returns to her Basque tribe, he promised that he would say that they did not have any intimate relationship. The girl asked again and clarified that he would tell him that she was still innocent. The man answered her in the affirmative. But Rosetta doubted that people would believe his words. The man assured that they would definitely believe, because people trust the attacker more than the victim. It seemed strange to the girl. She thought the opposite. Her hands automatically applied bandages to the man's torso. Rashid said his mother insisted she was pregnant with him before the kidnapping, but no one began to listen to her, because people believed her father more. Allegedly, his mother became pregnant by one of his slaves, and she lied in order to make the illegitimate Riga. The man said that then there was no need to listen to the exhausted woman. The girl paused. She didn't even know how to support him, and she didn't understand why his mother had no other path but death. The man was also deep in thought. The girl remembered that Krell told her that Riga's mother was a scoundrel, and naming her son Rashid, making her Riga, she died. The man claimed that his mother, through her death, proved that her son had inherited Kvat's blood. After all, people believe what they are told before they die. But it was surprising that recognition as the leader's wife was more important to her than being close to her son and protecting him. Rashid was surprised that his father did everything to save the woman he loved. As a result, it was not possible to protect anyone. While he was confessing, the girl was putting on a bandage. She admitted to herself that there wasn't that much negativity in her life. However, her desire to take revenge on the Basques became greater and greater. Rosetta wondered why he did not take revenge on her. Riga replied that he considered her innocent of anything, but most of his tribe did not think so. After all, it was quite natural to want to vent anger when the enemy's daughter was in front of your eyes. But Rashid was going to take revenge on the one who was directly responsible. He promised that her father's throat would definitely be in his hands. There was a hand with a clenched fist on the man's leg. The girl bandaged in silence just blinked, looking at her husband with round eyes. He looked at her sternly. Then Rashid turned away. He realized that the sugar doll would never understand his feelings even after learning from words what he had experienced. Finally, Rosetta finished with the bandage and mentally praised herself for her efforts. The man asked her not to arrange anything like today, because next time, even if she dies, he will not be able to save her. But the girl did not think that he saved her. After a minute of silence, she replied that she understood everything. She said that she understood that a fake wife might not be saved at all. Rashid assured that even if she were real, he would no longer come to save her, because he wasn't involved in saving women and other nonsense. The girl did not understand this. After all, he said that his father could not protect them, but she thought differently. After all, his parents are his life, And the position that he occupies in the tribe and among neighboring tribes also matters. And because of this, she wouldn't want to complicate things. The girl stopped short and said that he probably shouldn't listen to her. I thought it was too arrogant. Rosette glanced at her fictitious husband. He was surprised at her insight and ability to see the long term. Rosetta looked into his eyes and thought they were like precious stones. I saw them so beautiful. Then she realized that she had said it out loud and stopped short and froze in place from embarrassment for herself. The girl quickly lay down on the bed and covered her head with a blanket, saying that she was getting ready to sleep. Night fell on the forest and camp. On the cabinet there was a trough with water for washing wounds with bloody gauze. Nearby stood a still-burning candle on a copper tray. The man looked at his sleeping wife. Then he decided to sit next to her on the bed. He looked at her and at some point became lost in thought. He was surprised that she fell asleep so quickly, and he couldn't even find out if she was okay after everything that happened to her. Rashid carefully brushed her hair away from her neck. He thought she needed to examine herself first. The man regretted that he had told her all sorts of nonsense. He blew out the candle, preparing to rest too. Everything was difficult then. The men were sure that it was impossible to recognize an illegitimate leader. They believed that only purebreds could be their leaders. The other one with the mustache didn't believe Regina could lie to them, and the boy with red hair took out a sword. Then Rashid had to survive. His young and strong body was covered in blood and scars. He had to pay for the sins of his father, who abandoned his tribe to save the woman he loved. And on the battlefield around him lay the bodies of people and noble animals. If it weren't for that stupid choice, it might have been possible to stop these useless victims. He remembered the girl's words, that his parents protected his life, and his current status mattered to his father. The man believed that it was easy to talk and reason about something from the outside, when you yourself don't know anything and haven't experienced anything like this. Rashid carefully covered the girl with a blanket, who was already sleeping so sweetly. Then he also lay down on the other side of the bed, turning his back away from her. But the thoughts in his head kept him awake for a long time. Because of this warmth that wafted from the girl, he was reminded of the past. He asked his grandfather to leave the animal. He said it would be great, but it would be better for the wolf to live with other wolves like him. The boy sat next to the shaggy body and held it by the head. The wolf's paw was bandaged. The man assured that if they didn't let him go now, he wouldn't be able to return to his pack for the rest of his life. That he is very similar to a person. The boy's hand stroked the wolf's fur, and the man said that everything returns to where it came from. The tent flap opened slightly, and our heroine sat and rubbed her sleepy eyes. Then she casually glanced at the cabinet with the container. The water was already collected clean. She washed her face and dried it with a towel. The girl was surprised when Rashid even managed to sleep. And at this time the man entered the tent with a plate of fresh and aromatic food and wished her good morning. When Rosetta looked closer, she was surprised to see fresh bread on the plate. Boldly taking the loaf, she greedily took a bite and began chewing it vigorously. The man sat opposite her on a chair and gazed at the chewing girl, and she asked why he was looking at her like that. He replied that he just remembered one animal that he had previously raised. The girl assumed that it was a cat, but he dissuaded her, saying that it was a wolf. The girl involuntarily shuddered and made her eyes wide in surprise. She was offended that they were already rude to her in the morning. She reminded him that she promised to cooperate with him. The man said that you can only cooperate with those people who had equal relationships. The girl said that she only agreed to cooperate, that she understood his plan, and because of this she was ready to remain silent. She thought that in general everything was going quite well, that a man as old as her grandfather was going to marry a charming, beautiful, and young girl. But it turned out that Rashid prevented this. The man began to laugh at her words. He asked what she was just talking about herself like that. Rosetta modestly replied that she was not talking about herself, but she refused to explain it to him, allowed him to think as he wanted. She decided to eat in silence. I thought that without knowing the situation of other people, it was difficult to talk about something. The girl involuntarily gasped, accidentally biting her cheek. She held her hand on it, even a tear appeared from the pain. The man held her head, examining her. I asked her if she was hurt somewhere yesterday. The girl's heart began to jump out. She shook her head and assured that everything was fine. Apart from a slight tingling sensation, it didn't hurt anywhere else. Rashid was glad to hear this. He handed her a small jar on his hand. The girl did not dare to take it right away but asked what it was. The man said that while he was going to the village to buy food, he met an old healer along the way, and she assured him that it could be suitable for wounds. Therefore, he advised her to use it on the places where she hurts. The girl hesitantly took the jar and stammered her thanks. Outside, someone was telling Riga that everything was ready. The man was about to leave. He told his wife that if she finished eating, she could also go out, but she shouldn't be in too much of a hurry. When Rashid left, the girl touched the jar of the healer's medicinal potion. She was both curious and afraid at the same time. And the man at the tent was met by his two guys. He asked them why they were looking at him like that. Sika scratched his head and said that it was nothing like that. And next to it stood a cart with bags. The guys continued working. Sika judged from Riga's look that Regina had not escaped from him. He quietly whispered with his partner about this. The dark-haired guy asked if the girl went deep into the forest when she heard about the attack of the monsters. I was sure that was why Krell followed her. Sika assumed that they could not believe the words of the upstart. He reminded them that they had just heard laughter from Riga's tent. He said that for the first time in all his time he heard Riga laugh. His interlocutor expressed that he did not think that their leader would leave this rubbish next to him. Shiki pulled him back sharply with a threatening expression on his face, but the interlocutor assured that since the girl was the daughter of the Basque leader, she should be grateful that she was accepted at all. The blonde said it was his problem, and he won't tolerate bad language towards Regina. The guy said that he didn't expect anything else from him, reminding him that he himself was from a different tribe. He said with a sad look that he could not know what shame they suffered then. Sika was already beginning to boil, holding his sword at his belt. The brunette, shuddering, said that he was joking and did not want to offend anyone or challenge anyone to a duel. Sika turned around and walked away. His face was serious, his lips were compressed, and his nostrils flared, releasing air noisily. And his interlocutor remained standing with his head down. The guy thought to himself that he would not forgive if someone went against Riga. The tent flap opened and a golden-haired girl looked out. Sika greeted Regina. I wished her good morning. I asked if she got enough sleep today. The girl thanked, and she asked in response how he slept. She was clearly happy to see the friendly guy. Sika rubbed the back of his head. He asked the girl to call him you. After all, she was Riga's wife and therefore his mistress. The girl was surprised that this was possible. She mentally compared the guy to a cute dog. Out of excess feelings, the girl began to smile and stroke the guy on the head. Others who stood aside and saw what was happening were completely horrified. But then she noticed sideways glances. She felt embarrassed and apologized to the guy for allowing herself too much. He assured that nothing bad had happened. The guy said that she could consider him her younger brother. Then the girl was unexpectedly licked on the hand. She screamed in surprise, and she pulled her hand away as if from a burn. Sika told her not to be so scared. Introduced her horse Akal. He said that it was this little animal that carried her these 2 days, and he took and pulled the girl by the sleeve of her dress with his teeth. She asked what he was doing. The guy assured her that he was playing with her like that. He assured that the horse behaves this way quite rarely, and it seemed to him that he liked the girl. She asked if this horse would definitely not eat her today. Sika said that she could take his word for it. After all, he understood when an animal wants to kill and when it is just having fun. The girl recoiled in horror, and the guy told her that Akal has been so unpredictable since childhood. He can apply his hind legs, for example, if something worries him about a person. The girl was shocked by such stories. The guy boldly stroked the horse's wide muzzle with his hand. He said that now he is like silk. Sika drew her attention to the fact that he didn't bite at all and was simply a gentle soul. But then the horse deftly clicked his teeth. The guy barely managed to remove his hand, and the girl realized who she was dealing with. The blonde assured Regina that she shouldn't worry, that Akal won't do anything bad to her, and he offered the girl to pet the horse. She looked incredulously at the unpredictable animal. Rosetta thought that it was never too late to make friends. After all, it was thanks to him that she was able to come all this way. She carefully raised her hand to the horse's muzzle. He sniffed her palm. The girl carefully touched his muzzle and began to gently stroke his nose. She was surprised that he didn't even flinch. The guy said that the horse senses special people. After all, no one except Riga rode this horse. The girl continued to caress Akal. She spoke kind and affectionate words to him. She looked into his eyes and assured him that he was so handsome. Rashid approached them quietly from behind. He was surprised that the girl was already here. Sika told Riga that he introduced Regina to a call, and the horse obediently allowed the girl's gentle hands to touch his muzzle. The man told the guy that he was not in a position to introduce someone to the horse. Sika was surprised at such rudeness. He assured that he was friends with the horse and slapped him in the face. But the fingers were very quickly bitten by the horse. The guy groaned and began to scold the horse. Rosetta giggled loudly and had fun with the funny picture. The guy was surprised how Regina could laugh. She asked him to forgive him and asked if he had been bitten badly. Rashid barked at the guy that he would stop pretending. He ordered him to go to his horse and he loudly commanded everyone to leave. The girl asked to wait. She said that she wants to go with Sika today. 2 pairs of perplexed eyes looked at her. She made excuses that since Rashid was wounded, she could accidentally touch the wound and cause pain. The guy told Regina that proposing to a person of the opposite sex was okay. Rashid said that they would go ahead and he would follow, and he put the girl on the horse. She shuddered at this. And again, the horse's hooves clopped at a gallop along the road. Cool breeze and warm sun, the smell of flowers that enveloped them all today, delighted travelers. Our heroine asked herself, does Rosie also experience all these feelings when she rides a horse? Rashid asked his wife what Sika was talking to her about. The girl hesitated, not knowing what to say, but the man asked her to just tell him. He told her that it was not customary for them to ride a horse with someone with whom they were not in a loving relationship. The girl asked again that you can only go with a partner. She said in surprise that he was just a young guy, not a man. Riga asked if she knew what the nickname Sika meant. He held the reins tightly. The girl shook her head negatively. It turned out that it was translated as crazy dog. The girl was surprised how it was possible to talk about this sweet man like that. But the man assured her that he only looked so small and cute. And during the battle, he could fight for 5. He said that if she was seen on the same horse with another man, unnecessary rumors might spread. The girl assured that from now on she would only ride with him. Rosetta began to stroke the horse. She said that it was the first time she had seen such a beautiful animal. Rashid asked what was beautiful for her. The girl said that when she looked at something, she understood that it was beautiful, and that's all. The girl reasoned like this. What if you think about it, since childhood she called quite unusual and atypical things beautiful. As a girl, she happily brought pine cones, beetles, and insects to her mother. The man agreed that unusual things are really beautiful. He asked what else she would call that word, but she couldn't remember anything else. Rashid insisted that she think carefully. The girl protested because why should she think about such useless things? She agreed that the blue eyes and black horse could be called beautiful. The man looked at the girl for a long time, trying to understand her essence. She asked what would happen if his wound opened. She noticed that he seemed accustomed to enduring pain. Rashid assured her that they would be there tomorrow. The girl regretted that she would no longer be able to ride a horse. After all, now she realized how great it was to ride a horse so freely. The man told her that if she wanted, he could teach her to ride a horse on her own. A look of fear suddenly appeared on his face. The girl was worried about him and asked him what happened to him. The girl recalled that he had previously told her that she couldn't do anything, and that she should just sit quietly in one place. Rashid explained to her that he simply did not want to put her in the same position as others, but now he has changed his mind. He allowed her to do everything except escape. The girl thanked him with all her heart and she began to giggle quietly. A fresh wind blew in their faces, and from the clear sky the bright sun warmed their backs. The girl felt great. Meanwhile, in the Archduchy of Hazen, the guy asked where he could meet the Duke. The woman assured that he would definitely not come today, that he planned to stay with Mr. Flennin. The guy claimed that he had a letter for him and asked what he should do now. A blond man in a light suit approached them. He asked what happened. The woman addressed him as Your Highness and told him what happened. The guy got down on one knee. The man asked him who the letter to Isel was from. He answered with a bow that it was from the leader of the Basque tribe. The blonde wondered why the leader of the Basque tribe was suddenly writing letters to his son. He demanded that that letter be given to him, and the guy handed over the envelope. The man opened the seal and quickly read the message. The envelope also included a bracelet, and the man knew very well that he belonged to Princess Rosetta. He asked the guy who delivered this letter. He asked him to take him to his office. There was a knock on the door. The owner allowed the guest to enter. The hooded guy greeted His Highness on one knee. The blonde asked him if he himself was from the Basque tribe. The guy said that's how it is, that he was sent here by the daughter of the Basque leader Rosie and a knight named Alan. The Archduke asked whether what was written in that letter was true, that Princess Rosette was kidnapped by the leader of the Quat tribe. But the guy hesitated. The blonde promised that he would not report this incident to the Fox Kingdom. But I asked him to explain clearly what really happened there. He insisted that the princess was an important person to him, and his son left the castle not long ago and will not be able to help now. The messenger assured that he himself did not really know. The only thing he knew was that, unlike Mrs. Rosie, the Basque leader himself was against the release of the princess. The owner of the estate asked why this would be. The guy assured that, in truth, the leader did not know about the true status of the princess and allowed himself to be rude. And to cover up his mistake, he made a stupid decision. The Archduke insisted that he would still like to talk to him. He asked me to wait for him outside. The guy thanked His Highness and left. A woman's voice said that this was not good, but she overheard him. The blonde turned his head towards the sound and looked unkindly. The women's skirts rustled. The lady asked permission to read that letter to her. Afterwards, she asked her husband what he was thinking of doing. The man believed that they should first notify Isel, and then, as they ask in this letter, you need to rescue the princess from captivity. He held his head, which seemed to be splitting in pain. The busty woman giggled. She said that perhaps this was the chance. The man did not understand what she was talking about. She recalled that he was so saddened by Isel's engagement. The man flinched at the tone of her voice. It was common knowledge that in the Fox Kingdom, the eldest child inherits the throne regardless of gender. And it turned out that the eldest of the sisters had to take his place. In addition, there you could become anyone if you were talented and persistent. For example, Armand received the title of First Knight of the Order, and Princess Rosetta was constantly ill from childhood. There was nothing special about her except her pretty face and learned friendliness. And so the couple of archdukes sent their son Isel to them, hoping that the eldest princess would fall in love with him. And if this happened, then the next ruler, possessing special abilities inherent only to the heirs, would be their child Isel. But the card turned out differently. After all, if you want to make fate laugh, tell it about your plans. Isel chose Rosetta over her eldest, Princess Tanith, and in terms of age, she was more suitable for him in communicating with children. The man asked his wife what chance she was telling him about. She replied that the disappearance of the princess was to their advantage. The Archduchy of Heisen was founded by the kingdom, but over the past century their connection has weakened significantly, and they sent their only heir there to protect their borders and regain their favor. The woman crumpled the message paper. She said she regretted this decision for a long time, and she was sure that her husband would too. The man assured that he understood and joined his wife's concerns. But I didn't know how to understand someone else's soul. After all, even if Isel had given his heart to Tanit, no one knew whether she would have responded to his feelings. The lady said that she forgot about the most important thing. She believed that the eldest princess loved their son. There was a case in the Fox Kingdom a few years ago. A tea party was arranged. The queen and the archduchess sat at a table and engaged in small talk. The queen, noticing that her guest liked the tea, promised to give it to her home with her. She said that she was embarrassed, as if it wasn't enough that they were giving them their daughter, their princess. The hostess spoke with a sad look, that unlike other children, her Rosetta grew up receiving no education other than the basics. And now the girl was at that age when it was time to get married, and the mother was worried that this would affect the attitude of those around her. The guest did not understand why the queen was so worried. After all, who would dare to find fault with the princess? But she replied that sometimes it was impossible to avoid whispers behind her back, even if the girl was from the royal family. She believed that only Isel knew Rosetta well enough, and I was glad that he accepted everything so nobly. The archduchess said there was no need to worry so much. She was sure that the princess must have liked Hazen. The queen joined in her hopes. She said that she would like her youngest daughter to live an ordinary life, as a simple woman loved by her husband and as a mother who loves her children. The children were walking in the garden. The archduchess already understood everything then. With an almost elusive glance, the eldest Princess Tanit glanced at Isel, in whom a storm of emotions flashed in a second. Her husband asked her why she didn't tell him about this before. I wondered why she was now laying everything out to him when everything had already been decided. The woman did not believe that even if the king and queen found out about the preferences of the eldest daughter, This is unlikely to help them exchange one princess for another. She continued her thought. What if Rosetta remains missing, that this could change everything? The man asked again that his wife was suggesting that he hide information about the princess. The Archduke said they couldn't do that, but his wife assured that they didn't need to do anything special. After all, in the end, the letter asks for help from Isel and only he should know about it. The woman brought the paper to the candle and it began to burn with a bang. She looked into her husband's eyes. She told him that they had not seen either the one who brought the message or what was in it. It was already starting to get dark and the scarlet colors of the sunset were giving way to purple. The man gently touched the girl on the cheek. She rubbed her eyes sleepily. I asked where they had come. He replied that this was Edirne. Finally, they arrived in the capital. From the top, there was a view of the beautiful city. Rashid and Sika stopped their horses to admire the spectacle. The man threw his hooded cloak over his wife's head and shoulders. He said they would move very quickly. After all, we need to return to the castle as soon as possible. I advised her to hold on tight.
And Sika had already raised the blue flag and rode ahead of the entire procession. People shouted, "Riga is back, open the doors."
The hinges creaked and the heavy oak gates opened, letting a cavalry column into the city. Soon they were galloping through its streets. The herald signaled Riga's arrival. The townspeople paid close attention to the girl who was riding next to the leader. As they passed through the market, vendors called to swoop in for fresh fruit. One guy from their escort separated from them and greeted the lady. It seemed that it was his mother. To Rosetta, these people seemed so free and peaceful. It was also different from what she had read about the Ardennes. She was in the capital of Terra 3 years ago, and from the carriage window I saw both luxuriously dressed people and ragged people in the back streets. The girl asked her mother that Terra has always been considered the richest city in the world, and I wondered why there were so many poor people here. The queen said that her daughter should not ask about such things, and the girl looked out of the window with all her eyes. Now, driving past the crowd, our heroine saw how everyone was whispering, apparently surprised at her arrival with their master. She realized that Rashid had put this robe on her so as not to be so conspicuous to people, and she pulled it deeper onto her head. It was already dark when the procession arrived at Edirne Castle. Mr. Rashid was greeted by all the servants of the estate. One of them spoke for everyone. Why were they so worried? And they were infinitely glad that he returned. The man took the girl off the horse, helping her stand on her legs, which were numb from a long ride. The girl took off the hood from her head, revealing golden hair. Rashid, holding the girl by the elbows, introduced her as his wife. It was strange for the girl that there were no more explanations. The gentleman said with a pause that the girl had previously been the daughter of the Basque leader, but now she became his wife and their Regina. There was deathly silence. He turned to Thelma, promising to tell her everything and explain everything later. In the meantime, he asked the eldest in the castle to take his wife to the room, assuming that she was very tired from the road for 3 days, that they hardly rested. The maid obeyed the master. She asked if he would go with Regina too, but he said that he had one unresolved matter left. Rosetta looked pleadingly into her husband's eyes. She mentally asked him not to leave her alone among hostile people who were completely unfamiliar to her. She grabbed his sleeve. I asked where he was going. The servants were shocked when they saw this. The girl reproached herself that she was no longer a child to behave like that. She asked her husband for forgiveness and let go of his sleeve. Rashid took the girl by the hand. He looked into her eyes and assured her that he needed to talk to the elders, and he advised her to rest for now. And if she needed anything, he advised her to contact Thelma. The master introduced the maid to the girl and assured her that she would do everything. The woman with a bow assured that he stroked the girl's hand and went out the side gate, accompanied by his 2 assistants. Our heroine followed her husband with her eyes. When he was out of sight, the woman asked Regina to follow her. The castle walls were neat. They were only decorated with a few paintings and busts here and there. The girl looked at everything with delight and was surprised. Thelma noticed that she didn't look like she was brought there by force, but she admitted that the devil could pretend well. The woman asked if the girl wanted to know something. Rosetta asked if there were always drawings on these walls. She answered in the affirmative. The girl assured that the colors were simply amazing. I assumed it was probably some kind of special paint. Thelma answered briefly, "Yes." The woman said that it was all about the sap of special trees, that these grow only in these parts. The girl was absolutely delighted. And now I understood why I had never heard of this before. Thelma said that many people dream of getting such paint. For example, the Fox Kingdom demands it as tribute. The girl shuddered. The woman said that Mr. Rashid was well aware of the value of this paint, and she doesn't share it with anyone, that he is excellent at financial matters, and their prosperity was his merit. The maid stopped short, noticing that she herself did not understand how she was chatting. She invited the girl to go further. Thelma could not understand whether the master and the girl had everything by mutual consent or whether he took her by force, and she was debating whether to take her to his room or place her separately. After all, Riga didn't say anything about it. The woman looked from under the silence at the new mistress. She asked her what she thought about their Riga. The girl thought for a while and then smiled. She said that he was a kind and attentive person. Thelma noticed the ribbon and asked the lady about it. Rosetta said Rashid gave it to her, that at that moment she had nothing to fix her hair with. The woman asked if she knew what this thing was. She replied that she was aware that the tape belonged to his late mother. The maid pursed her lips. She reproached Riga. What was he thinking about? After all, he had never given it to anyone just like that in his entire life. And then suddenly, he decided to give a personal item to the daughter of the Basque leader. Rosetta's face fell. She asked what was wrong. The maid waved her hands, assuring that it was nothing like that. But then she admitted that she was surprised that Riga gave him an expensive and memorable thing that was very valuable to him. She explained that it was not, in fact, an ordinary tape, that she was tied with a bouquet of flowers that the past Riga gave to his Regina when he proposed marriage to her. The girl insisted that she did not know this. Thelma said that Edirne is famous for its colors, and creating this purple shade is very difficult. After all, you just had to go a little overboard with the color and everything went to waste. And Mr. Rashid is doing everything in his power to preserve this jewel. The girl listened with her mouth open, and even an involuntary exclamation escaped her. The maid, however, now understood where she should take the girl to settle down and rest. She led her into the master's room. She invited her to settle down while she took care of dinner, but she apologized and asked, "Can she take a bath first?" She hesitated and assured that they had been traveling for 3 days. Thelma assured that she would arrange for this immediately. When she went out into the corridor, her other maid asked if her mistress wanted to have dinner, but she answered negatively, claiming that the lady first wants to wash off the road dirt, and asked her to boil water for a bath. The girl asked with delight what kind of Regina she was. Her eyes were sparkling. Thelma reprimanded her for her lack of restraint. Benny, that was the name of the young maid, assured that everyone was very interested. After all, Regina appeared so suddenly. But the elder reproached the youth for their naivety and gullibility. Thelma said she only exchanged a few words with her, so I haven't formed an opinion myself yet. The young maid said that Regina spoke no Ardennesian at all. For the eldest, this was a surprise, and Benny assured that Sika told her about this. The girl raised her finger, and she said that she spoke Latin better than any of the local workers. Thelma agreed to assign the girl to serve her mistress, and I was so happy about it, like a child. The eldest asked to bring new clothes to the lady, and she asked me to burn the old one. The girl was touching the furniture. The room was completely without paintings or decorations. There was time-worn, first-class furniture and carpets. Rosetta loved the atmosphere in this room. She was as amazing as her owner. She went to the window. It had a clear view of the very center of the city. But then they knocked and entered the room. When they called, they said that Regina's bath was ready. A large vessel with blue transparent water was simply brought into the room. The girl was surprised that they brought the bath here. Rosette was surprised that the castle did not have a private bathroom. The maidservants moved the container closer. The maid said that she would take care of the mistress herself, and she told them to leave. Fresh, pre-prepared clothes were already lying on the chair. She introduced herself to the lady that her name was Benny, and she said that from that day on she would become her personal maid. Testing the water with her hand, Benny made sure it was at normal temperature. She invited the lady to take a bath. The girl also tested the water with her fingertips. She looked in the mirror and realized that this was her first bath in 3 days. Rosetta stood and the maid looked at her. Only after a short pause the girl realized that out of habit she was waiting to be undressed as it was in the palace. She took off her dress herself and put it on a chair. Our heroine climbed into a container of warm water. Benny said that she would help and gently rubbed her with a washcloth. The maid said that Regina has such a beautiful hair color, and her skin is soft and delicate. The girl rubbed her mistress's hands, and she noticed how kind she was. suggesting that perhaps the younger generation is not so negative towards the Basque tribe. Our heroine realized that this was the first time she had been treated so well, except for Sika, and thanks to this, her anxiety went away. The maid gasped. The girl asked her what happened. She said it was nothing to worry about. Rosetta turned her head, trying to understand what was so alarming. She said that she was the one who injured herself as a child. But everything has long since healed. The maid calmed down and said that then everything was fine. Otherwise, arrows usually leave painful wounds. Rosetta was surprised by the phrase about arrows. After all, the nanny told her that it happened when she was playing in the garden. Benny was absolutely sure that it was definitely an arrow mark, and she sighed, feeling sorry for the girl that she was injured at such an early age that she didn't even remember herself yet. The maid admitted to the mistress that she was very surprised when she first saw her. It was simply incomprehensible that their Riga brought a woman. Benny said that some people say that the girl is just Rashid's guest, but she herself considered her Regina. She began to develop this topic, that all her friends say that this is simply unheard of. And for Rosetta, these friendly relations were surprisingly pleasant. The girl was interested in Benya. Does she know where her husband went? She replied that Riga had gone to Elder Kalanta. Rosetta clarified who he was. It turned out that it was Riga's maternal grandfather. The lady assumed that this man was important to Rashid, since he immediately went to him. The maid was pouring hair out of a bottle of remedy. She assured that if it were not for grandfather, Riga would not exist at all. Rosetta seemed to say to herself that this means that her husband most likely will not come today. Benny was washing her long hair. She asked if the lady was lonely without her husband. The girl answered the question vaguely. The maid said that Riga always returns on the same day. She assured the lady that there was no need to worry, that she will probably spend the night with her husband together. The girl became embarrassed and plunged headlong under the water. Benny understood her mistress's questions in her own way. She assured the girl that Riga had no other Regina, so that she doesn't even think so. Rosetta caught flowers that floated in the water with her palms. She asked what they were called. The maid said it was lavender, that it is used for a pleasant smell or as a medicine. After taking a bath, Rosetta put on the clothes the maid had prepared in advance. Benny squeezed the mistress's hair in a towel, drying it. And then Rosetta got an electric shock. She saw the chair empty where she had left the clothes she had taken off. She jumped up and started screaming, asking where her hair ribbon was. Benny was so confused that she even hiccuped. She replied that all the lady's old clothes were sent to the furnace by order of Riga himself. The girl was asked if they had already burned her. The maid didn't know this for sure. Then Rosetta asked where her clothes were taken. I asked her to be taken there as quickly as possible. Benny said she was going, but the gentleman insisted that she had to go there herself, and she jumped out into the corridor. Turning around, the girl said that this ribbon was the only thing Rashid had left from his late mother. The maid realized how important it was and ran forward, calling on the mistress to run after her. They flew down the stairs like the wind. Benny opened the doors. The other servants looked at her in confusion. One of them asked Benny what happened. She asked her, shaking her shoulders, who took Regina's clothes? And have they already burned it? The woman replied that they had just thrown it into the oven. Rosetta ran towards the fire as quickly as possible. Our heroine looked into the stove with fire. Benny urged her to move away from there. The girl frowned from the heat. She made up her mind and snatched that same ribbon from the fire. The gray-haired man hugged his grandson. He was incredibly happy about it. He thanked God that he was okay. Calanthe said that he learned about his return not long ago, and he was already preparing to go to Riga. The young man apologized for making him worry. The gray-haired man assured that he had nothing to worry about, and he was very grateful that upon arrival he decided to immediately visit him. He asked if he completed his business successfully. Rashid assured that there would be no more cause for concern. He replied that it was nice, and he called to come inside. This was Calanthe Castle. Tall, smooth walls, guards at the modest gate. The men were sitting over a cup of tea. The elder said that Krell returned yesterday, and his leg was wounded. Rashid sipped hot tea. He asked how Elder Persian reacted to this. Calanthe said that he was extremely indignant. After all, a similar thing happened to his only heir. But since Krell himself was the first to announce the duel, there could be no claims against Rashid. The young man asked how he did it, but the elder insisted that he should not take his eyes off what could become a big problem. He recalled that the lands of the elder Persian were next to the territories of the Basques. He explained that if he harbored a grudge against him for the disgrace of his heir, this could turn into trouble for him. Rashid asked if it was worth getting rid of Krell as soon as possible, but the elder assured that if he had died during the duel, then the Persian would have had to accept his death. But in the current situation, he believed there was a high probability that he could decide to take revenge. After all, he always protected his son, and now that Krell is injured, he will especially look after and protect him. Rashid replied that he was going to kill him in a duel, but changed his mind. It seemed to him then that it would be more painful for his opponent to limp all his life. He said that before the fight, Krell crossed the line and openly insulted his wife. Calanthe asked what he meant. After all, there was no talk about the wife. The man lowered his eyes and assured that it had happened. The elder rubbed his forehead. He wondered how a man in such a hurry to prevent the union of the Basques and Kwa could find time to marry himself. Rashid reported that this happened 3 days ago. Calanthe was horrified at the suggestion that that bride was, but he interrupted him, confirming his guess that it was the daughter of the leader of the Basque tribe. The elder hoped that his grandson was not serious when he said this, and the man confirmed. He assured that when the time comes, he will return the girl to her family. He will not be able to make the daughter of his blood enemy his wife. Rashid said that he found out what he asked him for, and they said that it was difficult for even the Fox Kingdom to get to this place. Calanthe asked if he could now tell him what was happening, and why was he suddenly interested in the affairs of the temple and the kingdom. Rashid took a sip of tea from his cup and put it on the table. He said that the last time he came to Terra, he heard something interesting. He said that he was led to one person, who told him that he once worked as a guard at the castle of the Fox Kingdom. Then the man was under the influence of alcohol and began talking about some very strange things that were happening there, that he saw something there. The elder became interested. The man in the bar said that 10 years ago there was a hunt in the castle. The elder wondered why not in the surrounding area, but right in the castle. He asked why and what they were hunting for. It turned out that they were hunting birds there, but this was not accurate, and first they shot the bird, and then the man. Calanthe admitted that it could just be drunken ravings and should not be believed. Rashid insisted that he did not pay any attention to those words then either. I assumed that he was just chatting randomly when he was drunk. Then Rashid remembered that the Fox King died 10 years ago, and that brought him back to the man's story. It turned out that the king could actually be killed. According to tradition, when a king passes away, his body is shown to the people before being buried. But last time this tradition was partially neglected. Then they said that the cause of death was a fall from a horse, and it was unclear why hide the body if the king was the victim of an accident. Calanthe said he remembered another rumor, that the then king supposedly died at the hands of monsters. Rashid thought this was a rather strange assumption. After all, monsters could not get into the Fox Kingdom, and he wondered how then one of them could get to his ruler. In addition, bird hunting was carried out in the kingdom at the same time, and he was surprised at the suggestion that one of them could somehow be connected with the monster that killed the king. Rashid said that if these rumors are true, it was possible to find a connection. His face was tense. The elder said that when talking about Prita, ataraxia comes to mind. It is usually called maestra, but translated from Ardennes, it sounded like ataraxia. He argued that the last mention of it can be traced only in records that are more than several hundred years old, so it was not even known whether this bird was real. Rashid was surprised because ataraxia was supposed to protect the royal family. She was a symbol of the power of the Fox Kingdom. And even if the bird had not appeared for a long time, their power and authority were still enormous. Calanthe didn't understand why his grandson was so eager to get to the bottom of this. It was surprising that he was interested in the royal family. But he replied that that was not the point. He just wanted to know, was the Fox Kingdom involved in what happened 20 years ago? He insisted that this was all he was interested in. Rashid knew that during the war that his grandfather led 20 years ago, he saw a golden light, and after the previous Riga died, the Basque tribe ousted the Kavat from their lands. Calanthe remembered that the one who was supposed to become the next leader looked strangely shabby, and he didn't seem like an ordinary person. Then a duel took place, and he saw it with his own eyes. That applicant had a golden sword, proof that that person belongs to the royal family or occupies an important place in the state. and it could not be ruled out that the Fox Kingdom could be behind this. Rashid did not understand why they needed this. Some time ago, the eastern tribes united and founded the state of Toulouse. Fearing the threat, the Fox Kingdom decided to wreak havoc on their lands, inciting the Basque tribe to do so. Rashid believed that they must get to the bottom of the truth in order to find out about the real reasons. Calanthe said he understood everything, and he promised to contact him when they contact him from there. The grandson thanked his respected and beloved grandfather. The elder asked his grandson when he planned to hold the banquet. The man shuddered. He did not understand the reason for such a question, but he raised his finger. He insisted that it was necessary to celebrate their wedding. He knew that his grandson had not thought about it. He assured that it would be strange for them not to organize at least some kind of celebration on this occasion. The elder said that even though the wife was temporary, it was still worth following traditions, and the troubles and organization could be left to Thelma's discretion. Rashid agreed that she could prepare everything necessary. He promised to do everything that way. There was a knock on the door. Calanthe invited him in. The servant bowed. The gentleman ordered him to go and meet her tomorrow, and he told her to come to him as soon as possible. It was already evening. Rashid was approaching Edirne Castle holding his horse by the bridle. He wondered what his fictitious wife was doing now. He assumed that she was very tired and was already asleep. Yes, so tightly that he won't even notice if someone comes in, just like last time. Then he began to reproach himself for such thoughts. He even shuddered, and he couldn't understand why he began to think about the girl more often. After all, he had never been interested in the opposite sex before. He pushed open the door to the stables. He led the faithful steed to his resting place along the hay bales. The groom noticed the gentleman entering and jumped up. He greeted Riga. I asked when he returned. He assured me that he wanted to meet him, but he was already here. Then an empty bottle fell at his feet, clinking treacherously. Rashid reproached Mark for drinking alcohol again, but he insisted that he only took a small sip of everything and stood up staggering. The gentleman turned his head and reproachfully said that there was not a sip, but a whole bottle. The groom said that his master must have been very tired after coming a long way, and he advised him to rest. He promised to take care of this handsome man himself. Rashid was not sure that his Akal would listen to the drunkard. Mark assured that even if so, he was still the only one who could touch the horse, except the owner himself. The gentleman dissuaded him that another person had appeared, and he claimed that he liked Akal better compared to him. The groom was extremely surprised by this statement. Mark asked who we were talking about. After all, this horse never allowed anyone except its owner to approach it. He grabbed his head and complained about what was going on. Rashid reassured his groom. He said conciliatorily that he had a request. A small mare with a calm disposition was needed. He asked why he needed this. The gentleman revealed the secret that someone really wants to learn to ride a horse. And to the next question who it was, Rashid answered that it was his wife. Mark was even upset by what he heard. But then it just dawned on him and he was shocked. The groom scratched his ear with his little finger and said that he heard something like that. But then I thought that I had had a little too much to drink, and that's why all sorts of things were happening. Rashid, laughing, replied that everyone knows about everything, but he alone knows nothing. Riga advised the man to drink less, and he took the bucket and walked into the water. Mark asked who she even was, and in what kind of house are people in such a hurry to get married. He answered so that he could think about where they had returned from. The groom reasoned that his master was in Basque land, and it has something to do with the kidnapping of that girl from the wedding. Rashid said, exhaling, that this was the daughter of the Basque leader. The man screamed with all the strength in his lungs, but suddenly a girl came running from the servants in the castle. The bucket of water was quickly placed on the floor, causing some of the water to splash out. Riga asked the maid what happened and why she was in such a hurry. The girl, out of breath, told the chatter that Regina was badly injured. Rashid dropped everything and quickly ran to the scene. Soon he burst into the kitchen. The maid stood there, not knowing what to do and arguing, and his wife was sitting on the floor. The golden-haired girl kept her hands in a bucket of water. She looked at her husband with a guilty look. Her feet were bare, and there were traces of ash on her clothes and hair. The man thought that someone might have offended the girl because she was from the Basque region. He grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the water. The girl gasped in pain and pulled, breaking away from his grip. After examining her palm, He guessed that it was a burn. He asked what happened to her hands, but his wife remained silent, looking down at the floor. Rashid realized that she did not want to talk, and he said that in this case he would ask others. He took out a sword and, turning to the servants, menacingly asked them who did this to his wife. Everyone was silent, looking down. Rashid began to lose his temper. He muttered furiously through his teeth, "I repeat for the last time, who did this to my wife's hands?" The maids looked at each other with sad faces. Then Benny fell to her knees. She sobbed and turned to Riga that it was her fault, that it's all her fault. There was a purple ribbon on the floor. The maid insisted that she did not know that this thing was so expensive and meant so much. The man asked to clarify which one it was. Benny insisted that if she had known, she would never have allowed the tape to be thrown into the fire. She was on her knees and trembling all over. He asked Rashid to forgive her. Rosette jumped to her feet. She covered the maid with herself. She said that Benny was not to blame, that it was all because she herself put the hair ribbon in the wrong place. Rashid asked about the tape. The girl insisted that she was trying to find her, and when I came here it was almost burned out, and she handed him the rest, assuring him that this was all she could save. The man was surprised that she reached into the fire with her bare hands to get it, and the girl made an excuse that this was the only thing he had left of his late mother. Now she was already reproaching herself for climbing into the fire and burning her hands. She tried to give him the remains of the tape she saved. Rashid mentally scolded her for her rash act, but only the look of his blue eyes betrayed his condemnation. Thelma addressed Riga, interrupting his dialogue with his wife. She bowed and apologized for her tactlessness, but she offered to discuss everything later. And now I thought it was more important to treat Regina's wounds. The maid said that if the ointment is not applied immediately, scars may remain. Rashid agreed with her. He picked up his wife and carried her. The girl gasped in surprise. The husband asked her to put her hands on his neck, but so as not to touch with your palms. She nodded her head in agreement. Riga carried the girl in his arms from the kitchen. As he walked, he gave the order to Thelma to urgently send a doctor to his room. She obeyed the master's order. When the man left, there was noise and commotion in the kitchen. The head maid ordered Benny to take everything needed to treat the burns and follow her. Thelma believed that they both should beg Riga and Regina for forgiveness. The girl was sitting, and her hands in bandages lay obediently on her knees. The doctor told her to try not to use her hands for a while, and he advised her to rest properly for a speedy recovery. Thelma worriedly asked the doctor if there would be any scars on her mistress's hands. He turned his head in her direction. He assured, adjusting his glasses and looking over them, that the top layer of skin was not badly damaged, so it will quickly come back to normal. But in his opinion, the inner layer suffered more. The doctor turned towards Riga. He promised to do everything so that there would be no scars, and he asked him not to worry about it. He left them painkillers. He asked him to give his girlfriend a drink if she felt the pain getting worse. The doctor left, and Rashid with his wife and 2 maids remained in complete silence. Tilda told Riga that it was all her fault, that Benny was only following her orders, so if anyone should be punished, it should be her. The younger maid insisted that it was she who sent the clothes to be burned and was also to blame. Then the golden-haired girl stood up. She denied the maid's guilt. She assured that if she had immediately removed the tape, nothing would have happened, and she took all the blame on herself. Riga raised his hand. He asked to stop. He assured me that he understood everything. He said that no one is to blame for anything here, so I asked everyone to calm down finally. Rosetta saw her husband in complete calm in the role of peacemaker, but just a minute ago he seemed to be in a rage and with a sword in his hand. Of course he had the right to be angry, because she ruined his mother's thing. The girl reproached herself that she should have been more careful, but then her stomach began to growl treacherously. She was surprised that in such a situation her hunger still made itself felt. Riga pretended that it was rumbling in him. He embarrassedly insisted that he had not had dinner yet. Tilda asked the gentleman what to cook for him. The maids were leaving the door of the master's room. Benny was still whimpering. Thelma pulled her by the hand and asked her to express herself more quietly. When Rosetta was left alone with her husband, she thanked him for playing along with her. She realized that she was very embarrassed that her stomach was growling so suddenly. She blushed with shame and covered her face with her bandaged hands. Rashid said that everyone could hear her stomach singing a hungry song. The girl asked if it was necessary to say this. The man insisted that technically it was his stomach that made these melodic sounds. And I didn't understand why it was so important. Whose exactly did it? He said it was a matter of his authority. And he didn't want rumors to spread that he was starving his young and beautiful wife. The girl could not even imagine that her kidnapper would care so much about his reputation. And he wiped her face with a damp cloth, washing her. And he thought that it was not his style to say such a thing. Rashid put a bowl of water on the floor and sat down next to him. Our heroine was confused and did not understand that he was doing such a thing. The man took her foot and lowered it into the water, carefully washing her heels. He said that everything was because of him, and he helped her take care of herself as a sign of gratitude for the fact that she saved his mother's thing. The girl sadly replied that now the tape had become unusable anyway. Rashid insisted that this thing was not as important to him as she thought. After all, if he valued her so much, he would have hidden her from prying eyes. The girl clenched her bandaged hands into fists. He said that she saw how angry he was in the kitchen that he even took out a sword. The man insisted that the reason for this was not the tape. He admitted that he did not understand what had happened until she showed him the burnt remains of the tape. Then he thought that someone had deliberately hurt her. Rosetta wondered who might need this. After all, everyone treated her so well. And Thelma and Benny and the other maids. Rashid assured that anyone in his place would have thought so if he saw her on the floor with burnt hands. He asked her not to do that again. The man sat down next to the girl. He asked her to remember that this was not her homeland, but as long as he was around, she didn't have to worry. But otherwise, she had to take care of herself. Rosetta was surprised and asked hopefully if he would protect her. He confirmed this, but still he asked her without any recklessness like today. Rashid asked her to avoid such situations, even if she is riding a horse when she learns or even with a sword in her hands. The girl answered according to him and thanked him with a smile. The man continued to wash her feet, and she looked into his eyes with a smile. They both fell silent and it became so quiet. Only his touch and the gurgling of water broke the silence. The girl felt as if she had forgotten to breathe, and she was afraid that he might hear her heart beating loudly. There was a knock on the door and the door creaked on its hinges. The maids came in with trays. Tilda told Mr. Rashid that they had brought them dinner, and Benny froze in place at what she saw. Riga asked the maids to leave everything there at the door. Rosetta exhaled noisily about the emotion she had experienced. Tilda asked to let her know if they needed anything else. Both maids disappeared as if they were not there at all. Riga helped the girl sit down at the table, pulling a chair behind her. She was surprised and said that everything looked very tasty. She noted that this would be their first time eating together. Our heroine, seeing a plate with cooked crustaceans unknown to her, asked what it was. The man replied that these were shrimp, and I was amazed that she had never seen anything like this before. Rosetta said with a chuckle that it was not customary to eat this kind of food in her family, and I thought to myself that in the kingdom of the fox, they don't really like seafood on the table. Riga impaled one of the crustaceans on his fork and brought it to the girl's mouth. There was an expression of silent question on her face. She wondered if she wouldn't even be able to eat. She clenched her hands in the bandages and realized that it would be difficult for her to do this. The fork was slipping out of its grip. Rashid suggested calling a doctor, but the girl assured that everything was fine. She would just like to ask Thelma or Benny to feed her. The man was surprised by her consent to eat in front of them, and even in this form, and he brought the fork closer to her mouth with the stabbed shrimp. When the girl tasted it, she was pleasantly surprised. She said she thought it would taste like a bug. Her eyes sparkled with pleasure. Rosetta pointed at another dish. She said that then she would like to try this again. The man explained to her that it was a shell mollusk. The girl was chewing another piece that ended up on her fork in her mouth. She was surprised how much delicious food there is in the world, and Rashid was surprised that she found literally everything delicious. Another piece awaited her consent to be eaten. She asked where he got it from, and she insisted that she was more picky than he thought. Riga said that having never tried seafood, they lied to his face and said that they would do everything to come to an agreement with the merchants on the coast. Rosetta was surprised that it was really necessary to eat seafood in order to negotiate cooperation. Rashid assured her that people selling seafood and desert products were especially capricious and cruel. And he said that the most important thing when talking with them is not to refuse the food they offer and to eat everything clean. Rosetta chewed another piece and wondered what would happen if she refused. Riga said that this could be perceived as an insult and deprive him of the opportunity to build trusting business relationships at best. And in the worst case, they could simply be brutally killed. He said that a child like her shouldn't cross their path. The girl was surprised that he kept calling her a child, and I wondered how old he was. Rashid voiced, 23. The girl even jumped up and asked again. It turned out that they were only 3 years apart, and all the time he acted like he was at least 10 years older. Rosetta asked not to call her that again. The man brought her a glass to drink and calm down. He said that she should be glad that he perceives her as a child. He asked her if she wanted anything else. The girl said that she already had enough of everything to get enough. Rashid began to cut red fish on a plate with a knife. He chewed vigorously, piece after piece, and the girl thought that what was left was probably completely cold. The girl said that she heard from Thelma that he traveled to the Fox Kingdom under the guise of a merchant, and she asked why he did it. Rashid insisted that this was how he wanted to ensure the safety of trade routes. We needed roads on which traders could travel freely without fear of monsters. He said that if those bastards had not existed, then there would have been so many opportunities for the development of trade, and it would be much better if the monsters did not appear in the first place. The girl asked how it was. The man said that the bastards had appeared. After all, in ancient records there is not a word about monsters, that they did not appear immediately, but after a while. The girl said that she had read a lot, but this was the first time she had heard about this. Rashid insisted that she did not know the Ardennes, and what he told was from books written in ancient Levantine. The girl was surprised how old those books were. The man said that those books contain information about how life was conducted at that time, but at some point, records of monsters began to appear. This was around the time the Fox Kingdom was founded. The girl was surprised that this could be somehow connected. Rashid said that no one knew this for sure. He admitted that it could have been a simple coincidence. Rosetta now realized that perhaps she had been too arrogant, and maybe she was mistaken and her world is not as perfect as she then believed. Of course, everything she knew couldn't be true, but it was surprising that she realized this only after leaving the palace. She asked Rashid how he liked Tara, because he went there alone. He wiped his mouth. He said it felt like watching a sunset. The girl did not understand his phrase. He said that the moon grows and leaves the sky. People grow old and get sick. The fox seems to be going the same way. He believed that what gave rise to this was the tyranny of King Leculeo. Rosetta realized that little by little she was beginning to learn about her grandfather, who had once reigned on the throne of their kingdom. She knew almost nothing about him. Any mention of King Leculeo was taboo in the kingdom, and every time she thought about him, she got goosebumps. Rashid, seeing the girl's confusion, asked her what was wrong. I was worried that she might be in pain, remembering the doctor's words that if the pain intensified, it was worth taking the medicine. He touched her forehead, but she assured that everything was fine. The man stood up from his chair and it creaked. He walked up to his wife and took her in his arms. He said that she should have immediately informed him about the deterioration in her health. Rosetta shuddered and mentally wondered that she was being carried. After all, she burned her hands, not her feet. Rashid carefully sat his wife down on the bed. He took a bottle of medicine from the table, opened the cap, and brought it to the girl. He said that it might taste unpleasant, and advised him to drink it quickly. Rosette obediently took quick sips of the bitter, salty liquid, accepting the man's help in this matter, and then he patted her lightly on the back to make it easier to swallow the unpleasant pain medicine. Rashid suggested that she was probably tired, and suggested that she go to bed and rest. He said that he would be in another room, so that she would not be disturbed from resting peacefully. A woman's hand in bandages grabbed Riga's wrist. The girl asked him to wait. The man spun around, turning to look at her. Rosetta hesitated a little from embarrassment, and twirled a strand of hair on her finger. She asked him not to leave, but to stay with her a little longer. She said that they were together all these nights. He insisted that it was all because of the road and nothing more. And I was a little confused myself. The girl said that if they slept in different rooms, people would think it was strange for a married couple. Rashid said that he had not yet washed himself from the road. The girl assured that there was nothing wrong with that, and she was almost used to the way he smelled. The man didn't know how he was supposed to understand this. He took her hand, and he assured that he would stay here until she fell asleep. He lay down with his face turned to the edge of the bed and the girl's back. After some time, Rosetta turned to her husband that she was sure that he would become an excellent husband and father. The girl was surprised that he was so kind to her. And for those whom he sincerely loves even more so, everything will be wonderful. She said that she understood it immediately. Soon the girl was sleeping peacefully, snoring through her nose. Rashid quietly got out of bed. He looked at his sleeping wife. He believed that if she took after her father, she would be a rude and cruel person, and he would treat her accordingly too. But a girl, for the sake of those she knows, is capable of self-sacrifice for several days. He was surprised to the depths of his soul that his wife, without hesitation, put her hands into the fire, that she stood up, knowing about the possible punishment for the maid. He believed that the girl should have been more careful with people, and he carefully covered her with a blanket for a comfortable, warm sleep. Rashid admired his sleeping wife, but I saw her anxiety in a dream. She whispered, "Masha." She muttered something indistinctly. "No, please," he discerned, and he began to disturb the girl, waking her up from a nightmare. But the girl moved and pressed herself against him. Rashid instinctively hugged her and she fell asleep soundly, and he watched her sleep peacefully and thought to himself that he had made a big mistake, taking her with me. So they slept in an embrace until the morning, and when the sun was shining brightly through the window through the curtains, our heroine woke up. She stretched sleepily and said that she slept well, but she was surprised to see a sleeping man next to her and even screamed. But when she twitched Riga's hand on her shoulder, she twisted around trying to escape the grip, but he knocked her onto her back, and now she lay there, and her heart jumped out of fear. When the girl screamed, a frightened Benny opened the door and ran into the room. He asked Regina what happened, but she became embarrassed and froze in place when she saw the ambiguous picture. The gentleman was on top of his wife. The maid asked stutteringly for forgiveness. She said that she would visit them later, hurrying to hide behind the door. Rashid looked into the frightened eyes of his wife, and her heart was ready to jump out of her chest. The man's shirt was open, exposing his pumped-up torso, which further excited the girl's gaze. The man remembered how she asked him to stay. He took her hand. The girl asked her to forgive her for screaming. She justified herself that she didn't know he was nearby. He wondered why he couldn't be there. Rashid touched her forehead with his hand. He said, as if to himself, that there was no temperature. He looked into her eyes to understand the state of her health. The girl assured him that everything was fine with her. The man recommended that she rest today, and if it gets hot, you could take a walk. He promised to arrange for the maids to give her a tour. The girl even blushed with delight. I asked if this was possible, and I was happy like a child. Rashid reminded her that he had already told her before, that she can do absolutely anything. He warned that he would return late, most likely at night. And if she needs anything, let her tell Benny or Thelma. Rosetta confidently declared that everything would be fine with her. She told him not to worry about her and to go about his business calmly. When leaving, Rashid muttered that anyway, his Regina only needs him at night. He said that he would follow her wishes. He turned around and left the room, and our heroine was left with a silent question on her face, all alone in her husband's room. She couldn't understand what offended him so much, but the man noticed everything and chuckled quietly under his breath as he left. When Rashid closed the doors to the room behind him, the maids whispered quietly among themselves. Thelma asked the gentleman what he wanted for breakfast today, but he declared that it was time for him to attend to urgent matters. But he ordered that breakfast be taken to Regina. Benny asked if it was worth preparing the water for the bath then. The master ordered Thelma to invite merchants to the castle, those who sell fabrics, jewelry, and all sorts of trinkets that women love so much. The senior maid asked Riga if this was for his wife. The man answered in the affirmative. He reported that when the girl's hands healed, they should throw a ball in her honor. But for this, it was necessary to have time to prepare everything necessary. Thelma insisted that she understood everything. But I told the gentleman that if he wants Regina to get better quickly, then she shouldn't overwork herself. Rashid thought about the words of the maid who had been a servant since his mother's time, and he valued her opinion. But now it seemed that she had misunderstood him and was a little confused. But then he thought that it would be better if they thought that their Regina was a happy wife who was loved immensely by her husband, and not something else. And so he promised Thelma that he would be more attentive. When the gentleman left, Benny began to be surprised that Riga did not even deny, and she assured that she saw everything with her own eyes. Thelma glared sternly and answered the younger maid that she shouldn't talk about such things, and she advised her to think with her head what would happen if other servants heard her. That rumors could spread. Thelma told Regina that she brought her water to wash her face with. She twisted the towel from the water into the basin, and she carefully wiped her face and straightened her hair. She said that she would help her today so that she would not have to wet the bandages. Thelma spoke to the mistress, looking down at the floor. Why was she so ashamed of yesterday? And the lady must feel embarrassed because the maid said something without even really understanding the situation. She said, wringing her hands, that it was all her fault. She was sure that she should have taken care of this tape. Thelma remembered how she wove this ribbon into the hair of Riga's mother in her youth, even before he was born. Then the mistress told the maid that she was like a sister to her. And now it was clear that this tape was important not only for Rachel, but also for herself. And she bowed and thanked the girl for preserving the thing that had once belonged to Mrs. Alicia. Rosetta, smiling, assured that she understood this, looking at how Thelma asked Mr. Rashid to return that tape. The maid involuntarily twitched. The girl quietly said that she was glad that her efforts were not in vain. Benny began to whine hearing all this. The lady was sitting on the bed. She asked the maids for permission to express her gratitude to them for their help. The girl told Benny that everything worked out thanks to her. The maid looked up at her mistress with eyes full of misunderstanding. That it was the maid who came out first, and she was only infected by her courage. Rosetta laughed and said that her husband looked so menacing yesterday. Thelma agreed, and Benny assured that she was very scared, because Riga had never pointed a sword at them before. The lady was surprised. After all, the maid came forward anyway and thought it was amazing. Benny just shook her head. Regina told the young maid that she would have a favor to ask of her. The girl became all ears. The lady asked her to teach her the Ardennes language. Benny was surprised, told Regina it wasn't necessary at all. After all high-ranking gentlemen speak Latin. Rosetta was sure that the locals did not know him, and if she knew even a little Ardennes, what happened could have been prevented. Benny's eyes sparkled. She was glad that she could be useful to her mistress in such a difficult matter. She said she would be happy to do it. And our heroine was also pleased that she was able to make friends with the maid. She thanked her and said that she really hopes for her. 6 men sat at a long table and made noise. One said that there was a rumor that Riga made a girl from the Basque tribe his Regina. And not just anyone, but the daughter of the leader himself. The speaker emphasized that if they turn out to be of the same blood, then what will happen? Another asked his colleague to be more careful with his words. The son of one of the elders has already paid for such statements, and apparently that poor guy will now remain lame for the rest of his life. I thought this should serve as a lesson to everyone. Then suddenly the door opened. The men greeted Mr. Calanthe. The gray-haired but still strong man slowly entered the room with dignity and order. He was surprised that during this time they had not had time to talk enough. He claimed that they could be heard even on the street. Already in the presence of Elder Calanthe, silence fell. The men just silently looked at each other. Meanwhile, the elder took his place at the head of the table. The man closest to him asked if he had already met Riga, and how he explained what happened. Calanthe insisted that Riga did not say anything special to him at the meeting. But if you judge for yourself. Then there Riga found the ideal way out of the situation. He believed that in the end, didn't he sacrifice himself for the good of his people and the entire tribe? And he assured that if anyone did not want this wedding most of all, it was Riga. One also gray-haired man said that it was still a pity that this happened. After all, many of them were waiting for Riga's wedding, and all those whose daughters would be suitable for the role of Regina must be very upset now. Then the red-haired elder Persian appeared on the threshold. He looked rather gloomy and unfriendly. Elder Calanthe came out to meet his colleague, opening his arms to him. He said that he was glad to see him and that everyone was already tired of waiting. He asked more quietly how his son was doing. The Persian thanked him for his concern. He assured that he was already feeling better. Calanthe assured that Riga was also worried, that he was very annoyed because he agreed to that stupid duel. Even though Krell himself called him, he thought that he should have been more tolerant. He took Persian by the elbow. He assured that if anything was needed, they would definitely tell him and he will be happy to help. The elder patted his colleague on the shoulder. He replied that, of course, and he himself was surprised by this treatment. A few days earlier, Persian had shouted at his son that he was a cretin. He reminded him that he had warned him earlier not to rush, and now he banged on the table with his fists. The man stood at the table in his father's office. He continued to scold his son, that he had to sit and keep a low profile without drawing attention to himself. The older man said that they had been waiting for this for so long, and his son just took it and ruined everything in an instant. 20 years ago, Riga was killed in Basqueland. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Being an illegitimate child, Persian could not claim this role, and all he could do was watch helplessly and silently watch as his step-younger brother takes this place. To save his beloved woman, he went to the Basques, and there he met his death. Riga was taken on her last journey and buried, and the elders began to discuss who would become the next Riga. And the Persian was contentedly anticipating a successful turn of fate for himself. Calanthe then said that the true heir had not yet been born, so they would have to wait a little longer. The Persian then kept silent, only clenching his fists. Regina gave birth to a boy with blue eyes after a term, and then the illegitimate pretender learned the shocking truth from the letter, that when Regina was brought to the Basques, then she was thrown into the slaves. Then, of course, the elders turned their backs on the woman and her damned child, and the Persian was already tasting his victory for power. And everything was going perfect until Regina committed suicide, and Calanthe bitterly mourned his daughter. But with her death, the woman proved her innocence and thereby radically cut off the Persian plan. From now on, Krell could not become Riga, even if Rashid disappeared. And all this happened only because he guessed the moment correctly. But as they say, life always gives you 3 chances. And he still had the last one left. He promised to wait patiently for him. The Persian, sitting at the head of the table just like Calanthe, announced the beginning of the meeting. Rashid was riding along the night road. His horse clopped its hooves rhythmically. The man was thinking to himself, that judging by the reports, no suspicious people from Lisa have yet been encountered. He drove up to the stables. Mark joyfully greeted the gentleman. Rashid praised the fact that he even looked good today, suggesting that he did not drink alcohol. The groom asked why Riga was not happy about this. Mark asked how Regina was doing. The gentleman answered him that, according to the doctor, everything would heal soon, and if the scars remain, they will be almost invisible. The groom thanked the heavens and asked them for the speedy recovery of his mistress. He couldn't understand why Riga was looking at him like that. Rashid said that it was somehow unexpected for him, because he thought that he didn't like her. Mark scratched his cheek. He hesitated, but then admitted that at first it was like that, because the girl was the daughter of the Basque leader. But when he found out that she, despite the danger, rushed to save the thing of the late Regina, then he changed his mind about the girl. Rashid accepted this position, and I was silently surprised at the girl's incredible ability to influence people and definitely win them over. Thelma, Benny, and even Mark were influenced by her innocence, charm, and simplicity, but earning their respect was not so easy. He admitted to himself that he did not know his wife at all. The groom assured that he would take care of Alcala himself, and he advised Riga to quickly go to his Regina. He made fun of him, telling him to try his best there. Rashid snapped back. Mark didn't pay attention to it. He said that he understood everything because it was a young business, and he asked the gentleman there not to overdo it. It turned out that the morning misunderstanding had reached here too. It was amazing how quickly rumors spread. Rashid wanted to answer something at first, but then I changed my mind. I just said goodbye and left. Night had already fallen on the castle and the moon was shining. The man quietly entered his room, but the door still creaked treacherously. He tried not to make much noise so as not to wake up the sleeping girl, but the bed was empty and it was suspiciously quiet. He called the girl by name, but no one responded. The man was even afraid for her. He tensed his whole body and began to look around. And then he saw movement behind the curtain. He wondered how a mercenary could get here, and his hand tightly grasped the dagger on his belt, unfastening the carbine. Rashid thought that there had been no uninvited guests for a long time, and he walked confidently in that direction. Coming close to the curtain, he took out a dagger and swung it. The girl asked him to stop. The dagger was pointed at her throat. She said it was her and trembled all over. Rashid sheathed his weapon. He asked his wife what she was doing there. She said that she just wanted to pick up the comb. Rosetta explained that she was combing her hair while sitting on the bed and accidentally dropped it, and he came in when she was about to pick her up. In her hands with bandages, the girl held a hair comb. Rashid was surprised that this was possible. After all, the distance from the bed to the window was quite large. The girl's heart was jumping out of her chest. The girl said that her hair was dry. Benny looked so tired. So she decided to let her go to rest. She remembered that the doctor allowed her to hold something in her hands if there was no pain. The man looked at his wife with condemnation. He asked if she understood that he had just nearly killed her with a dagger. The girl involuntarily shuddered all over. He claimed that he mistook her for a mercenary when she was behind the curtain. The girl was horrified that there might be a killer here. Rashid said that this had not happened for a long time, so there was no need to worry in vain, but he asked her next time to try to stay where he could see her immediately. The girl answered okay, and nodded her head in agreement. The man then suggested that she continue combing her hair. Rashid sat down on the bed. Our heroine sat on the other side and shook a comb tangled in her hair. And at some point, the scallop flew off to the side a considerable distance. Rashid said that he had the impression that the girl had never combed herself before. Rosetta sat and smiled innocently like a child. Rashid noticed that she was simply an amazing woman. He got out of bed and went to pick up the comb that had fallen to the floor. Then he decisively pushed back the chair and invited his wife to sit on it. The girl asked why this was necessary. Rashid said that it was necessary since she needed to comb her hair. He made the golden-haired girl sit more comfortably. The girl was surprised why he wanted to help her. The man said that if he didn't help her, then soon there would be nothing left of this room. Rosetta asked him not to exaggerate. A shock of golden hair hung down from the back of the chair. Rashid took the golden strands of hair with a confident hand and began to comb them expertly with a comb. Rosetta said that it seemed to her that this was not the first time for a man to comb a girl's hair, and she reminded me how he helped me deftly braid my hair that time in the forest on the road. He refuted her assumption. The girl then expressed confidence that he simply had talent for this matter. It didn't hurt her at all, and she smiled sweetly. Rashid was sure that cleavers were always painful to comb, that even small children know this. The girl fell asleep in pain. She took his words for the grumbling of an old man. She said that if you looked closely, he looked like a 100-year-old man. She gasped again that she had been bitten by the hair. The man pulled the strand deeper with a comb. The girl took her words back, assuring that she had made a bad joke and was apologizing. Soon the comb was already sliding freely through the hair and did not get tangled in it. Then Rashid, from the robe set, made a bow on the tail from his wife's golden hair. He said that everything was ready. He said that he had ordered Thelma to invite merchants to the castle. He assured that there should be a large selection. Rosetta smiled sweetly at Riga and asked if she could take whatever she wanted from those merchants. The man reminded her about ribbons and jewelry. He told her to choose whatever she liked. He thought that large and bright jewelry would not suit the girl, that pearls would be more suitable for her, gentle and calm. He would like to see something unpretentious on her, but graceful and elegant. Rosetta looked at her husband with a silent question. He told her to decide for herself, and he reproached himself for his stupid thoughts. The girl assured him that he shouldn't worry about it, so that he wouldn't worry so much. The man was lying relaxed on the bed. The girl said that she thought that if mercenaries were waiting for him at night, then how could he sleep normally all this time? Rashid insisted that he had long been accustomed to such shallow sleep. The girl assured that while she was here, he would be able to get a good night's sleep. She offered to take turns on duty. The man giggled and asked who would protect whom if someone climbed in while he was sleeping. The girl assured that it wasn't all that serious. Rosetta thought this was strange. After all, some may find it romantic and cause fear and disgust in someone. Rashid asked her what it was about. The girl was talking about a night visit. This was an ancient custom of the Fox Kingdom. It was usually held in private homes. Before the wedding, a man had to secretly sneak into a woman's room. And the higher the floor she lived and the more difficult it was to climb, the more sincere his love was recognized. But due to a number of cases where men fell out of windows and fell to their deaths, this custom was banned, although they probably didn't really follow it. Rashid confirmed that of course there are idiots everywhere who are ready to do anything for love, and you won't surprise anyone with something like this. Rosetta said that if someone climbed up to her like that, despite all the danger just to see her, she would probably have been moved to tears then. Rashid chuckled at this. He was sure that the probability of running into a thief was much higher. The girl was surprised how he could spoil the entire romantic atmosphere with his dryness. She asked him to just listen, that the man climbing through the window like that was romantic and in love. The noble white horse galloped, urged on by its impatient owner. The noble animal's hooves clattered along the stone-paved roads. A rider with white hair and red eyes sat on a horse. The people he met shouted, "Look, it's Duke Isel!" The girls whispered that he was soon to marry the princess of the Fox Kingdom. They said that the parents cared very much about their youngest daughter. They said that the wandering poet Asian himself dedicated songs to her. They envied that the girl would become the wife of such a handsome and noble man. Then a girl jumped out at the horse's feet. The animal reared up. Isel tried to hold him back. The knight grabbed that girl by the hand and angrily asked her what she was doing. I asked her if she knew who was on the horse. The girl shuddered. The man twisted her wrists and while holding her ordered her to tie her hands tightly. But Isel ordered the girl to be released. The young duke assumed that she simply needed money. He ordered to give her the necessary amount and let her go home. The knight argued with the gentleman. He said that if you let such an ill-mannered person go without proper punishment, others will think that they can do the same too. After all, the gentlemen are not able to cope even with such a trifle. Isel laughingly said that if he is so weak that he feels threatened even in this, then wouldn't it be better to just kill her? The girl broke free of the grip and fell to her knees in front of Duke Isel. She insisted that she did not need money, that she only wants the unjust death of her brother to be sorted out. The gathered people reproached her for taking up her task again. They asked why she thought that their duke had time for this trial. The girl told Duke Isel that her brother's name was Hugh, that he was going to give him something, but he was killed the next day in such a way that it was framed as suicide.